Hello, welcome to the November 17th, 2023 Club Cubase live stream. My name is Greg Undo and I'm the host of the live stream. If you have not attended a live stream before, how it works is you can ask questions by entering them in the live chat field, or you can send questions in advance if it's more involved. Sorry, let me just turn the volume down here. My monitoring computer. Or you could send questions in advance to clubcubase@steinberg.de. When asking questions, if you could specify which level of Cubase you're running. So if it's Cubase LE, AI, Elements, Artist, or Pro, if it's version 11, 12, or 13, and which operating system you're using, that would be helpful. My ability to answer all of the questions in real time will soon be eclipsed by the number of questions coming in. I'll try my best to go through each of the questions chronologically. So if you don't see an immediate response to your question, we'll get through it in the order that they were asked. So if we could avoid asking the same question over and over again, that would be appreciated. We should have the index of all topics that are covered in today's live stream pinned to the top of the comments field shortly. Several hours after the live stream ends. I have to go back and basically watch the live stream and type up all the questions with the timestamps. And if you wanted to search for topics that have been covered in previous Club Cubase live streams, you could go to cubaseindex.com. And we want to thank Jan for creating that website. It's a wonderful resource for people. We also have two people that serve as moderators. We have Agent K and Jazz Dude. So we want to give special thanks to them. They're not Steinberg employees. They just do it to make it a better community experience. And we also want to give special thanks to Jazz Dude for his efforts with the Cubase Nation Discord site, which is a great source of information that's really relevant for the Steinberg community, of different tutorials and helpful links and information, again, for the Steinberg community. So once again, my name is Greg Undo. I work for Yamaha Corporation of America, which is the U.S. distributor of Steinberg products, and I'm the host. I'm presenting from outside of Alexandria, outside of Washington, D.C. area in the United States, in Alexandria, Virginia. And if you're watching this live, please feel free to introduce yourself and tell us where you're from. One quick programming note, next Friday's live stream is a holiday in the United States, so we won't be doing a live stream. We'll be doing our next live stream on Tuesday, but next Friday is the day after Thanksgiving, or Black Friday. So for those are wondering why, do you see so many sales, especially with plugins and different products for Black Friday. It's kind of the day after Thanksgiving when most people have the day off, and it was a convenient time to theoretically get your Christmas shopping done. So, but it is a holiday in the U.S., so I'll be spending that with my family, and we won't have a live stream on Friday, but we'll continue on the following Tuesday, which will be the last live stream of the month, where we'll do a Zoom meetup. So just a quick note on that. I'll make a reminder note on Tuesday's live stream, but with that, we'll go ahead and get started. All right, so you see just a question. Is there a way to input a MIDI note at the same spot and not switch to the other MIDI track when using the multi-part editing feature where you can see multiple MIDI tracks? So generally what I do, and I think what you need to do is, one is you could record the particular MIDI events. If you record multiple MIDI events here, so let's say if we were just selling this, I would take, let's say, these multiple MIDI events. So if I just put these into record, we could record on all 4 tracks at one time. If we were to do editing on this and we're making changes, let's say we go to our new multi-part editor and we look at our 4 MIDI tracks here. So, and we could see that we'll have the MIDI tracks kind of automatically aligned here. So if we want to enter in particular notes, we could, so we do this, it's going to enter it in on the one particular part. So if we go and look at just one part here, so we'll just double click, so we'll see that these changes aren't going to be reflected in the other parts, just in the bottom part. But what you can do is just come here and we will copy those particular events. And if we have the track view, so if you come over here to the right to upper right hand corner and activate the tracks, at this point I could select this particular track, and then we could do like Alt or Option plus V, which will paste at origin, select this track, Alt or Option V, paste at origin. And now when I go to look at just a single track, those particular events will automatically be reflected in those particular parts. So you could copy and paste to the different tracks, but I don't think that there's a way to automatically input to multiple tracks, and that could cause some problems down the road. All right, so we just see comment Greg Undo is passports info. So if that's a question, I'm not sure if I understand it. So I do have a passport. I'm familiar with the old software company Passport, but maybe if you could re-ask the question in a different way, I would be able to try to help. All right, so Michael Marshall from Somerset, UK asks, anyone else finding older MediaBay items, just the 5 new ones not appearing in Cubase 13 Pro, Windows 11, Ryzen 5950X, 128 gigs RAM, thanks in advance. So if you're not seeing those particular things, maybe if you go to the MediaBay, and once we open this up, go to the VST sound, see if you see it listed here, and you might have to just right click and choose to like rescan disk. So let's say, okay, I was looking at like Hip Hop Vault, which is one of the sound loop sets. Come over here and try to rescan disk and see if that makes a difference. You could also come to, there's a utility that's installed with Cubase called the Steinberg Library Manager, and make sure that you come here and you can see whether you want Groove Agent, different Cubase Nuendo content or Hallian content. You could see if they're showing up here. And if, you could, at this point, you could see the details. But if you see them showing up here, then, just come into the VST sound folder here and, expand that. And if you don't see it, like Blockbuster is one with the sound sets, just right click and rescan the disk, and that'll probably take care of it for you. And we're glad you can make it, Michael. It's always wonderful to see Walter Blackledge, who's a member of the Club Cubase St. Louis group. Glad you could make it today. All right, we see Mark Rabin on from Montana. Glad you could make it. And we hope Stella is doing well. Everyone will give a woof woof to Stella, to Mark's dog. So, and he just has a comment. I just want to say thanks to myself and Jazz and the Cubase family. Okay, and he says with Cubase 13, he finally found out that older Waves plugins are causing his CPU to peak. Okay, glad you're able to isolate that. And his advice to others is, if you're using older Waves plugins, try swapping them out to see if the CPU demands decrease. All right, Peter just asks, is it just me, or does November feel like it's flying by so quickly? It kind of feels that way to me. It's hard to believe that Thanksgiving in the U.S., it's kind of earlier this year. It's usually in the U.S., where those outside the U.S., it's the fourth Thursday, and I think like the first, or November 2nd was the first Thursday, so it's coming a little earlier. But it could be that I'm just getting older. All right, so we see Jan from Stockholm, just wishing everyone well. All right, we have Benny from Sweden checking in as well. Thanks for being here. All right, we have Robbie Bowling, a very loyal attendee from probably the very first live stream from Dallas, Texas. Always great to see you on. We see Stefan from Sweden. All right, so we see, will Cubase ever have pre-fader monitoring? So if you wanted to see what the source of, let's say if we look at a particular, and I'll just take my volume down so you don't have to listen to it, because I'm sure people love hearing a test tone. But you know what you can do is see the signal that is coming off of the particular sound. So let me just come here. So let's say if we have our test tone and we see that our test tone is at, let's say, minus 12 dB. All right, I'll just put this in the loop, sorry. Okay, so we'll have our test tone here, like when we have it on, we can say that we're at minus 16 dB, but if we right click, we could change the meter position. So if we go to your global meter settings, we could see, let's look at the input meter. So now we'll see what is going on with the particular meter. So if I adjust the fader on this particular track, we'll see that we're seeing the input source from the track, or what the level is off of the hard disk, and not the level that is coming that's on the track itself. So as we increase or decrease, we're seeing the input meter right there. So let me know if that's helpful for you. So again, just right click on the meters, we go to global meter settings, and we could switch this to input meter right there. All right. All right, so we see from Tommy C, hi G, is there a way on one audio channel to open all insert plugins to edit, then close all of them? All right, thanks. Okay, so I think if we, I have one track with a number of inserts on it. Just okay, so let's say we'll go to audio 5. Okay, so I think if we where we see the edit key, if we hold down Alt, let's see if it's, all right, so on the edit key, what you have to do is hold down Alt or Option plus Shift, and like where we open up the channel settings, hold down Alt or Option plus Shift, and then all the plugins on that particular channel will open. And if you wanted to close all the plugin windows, if you go to the Windows menu, you could see close all plugin windows as a function. So Alt or Option plus on the edit channel settings, Alt or Option plus Shift, click, all the plugins will open. From the Windows menu, we could close all plugins. So give that a try. All right, we see Uno Mementos from a very dark minus 5 degrees Celsius, Finland. All right, we're glad you could join us. Hopefully we'll bring a little bit of light into your evening there. Wonderful to see Razel from Denmark. We see Spike Williams checking in from Wales. All right, Quellen says, it says, hello, Greg. Which shortcut can I use to replace a snare from the project by dragging a snare sample from the media bay? All right, so let's take a look at that. Okay, so let's say if I have a particular, like in this case, I have a kick. And if I wanted to replace every instance of that kick with a new sample, what I could do is I'll just come over to Media Bay. Let's look for our loops and samples. So say we'll go hunting for a kick. Okay, so what I could do now is drag it over top while holding down the Shift key, and we'll get a message that says, do you want to replace all events that refer to the same audio material? Say yes to all. So just now come over here, hold down Shift, drag the sample on top of another sample that's being used multiple times, and we can just replace the kick sample just that easily. So if you want to do it for a kick or a snare, then you could just do that in context of the track. So let me know if that's helpful. All right, so we have George Robinson's just saying hello and thank you for today's live stream from Georgia. He's GR Voices from Atlanta, so great town. Always loved going to Atlanta. Okay, so we see a question from Naeem Gary. Hello, hey Greg, how do you switch the chord pad from major to minor? All right, so let's say we go to my chord pads here, and I'll just activate. So all you would have to do is, if you, on older versions, if you double click, you could open up the chord editor. So if we want to look at this, we could now, in Cubase 11, we could just come right over here. So we say, okay, I have C major, minor, diminished, augmented, so sus2, sus4. So we could just see our different chord voicings here. So select the chord pad, and if you're in version 12 or earlier, double click and you could set from major to minor. In version 13, we could just do it right over here on the chord editor, which is kind of anchored in the right hand zone to make it more convenient. All right, we see that the question's about Cubase 13. All right. All right, so we see from Blazer Bright 383K views. Hello, please help. In my latest Cubase 13, I can't see the musical mode option in the tools bar above the playlist window. Please help. All right, so if we select a particular event, let's say an audio file here, and we don't see musical mode, what you could do is just kind of right click and make sure that you see that musical mode is turned on. So we'll come over here so we can see musical mode here. Now sometimes depending upon your screen resolution, it might be active, but it may be over towards the right. So in Cubase 13, what we could do is once you kind of hover over musical mode, we can just drag this over. If we select from the right, we see this little tag appear, and then you could move it up, and that will move the musical mode. As we move it up visually here, it moves it more to the left. So depending upon what functions you have, you may just have to adjust the musical mode to just kind of move it up or down like that to make it visible. So give that a try, and and you could also just make sure that musical mode is checked. So, but depending on your screen resolution, it may be just too far off to the right to activate. So let me know if that helps. sorry, my chat field just jumped on me. All right. All right. So we see from Benny, just says, hey Greg, I'm Pro 13 Media Bay Right Zone. Auditioning loops from a network drive is very hit and miss. Main Media Bay is fine. Any reason for this? All folders scanned. Make sure that you don't have, usually as you do this, it could be that, Media Bay is accessing all of your samples quickly. If it's a network drive, it could be that by the time it goes through the network, that may take a little bit longer. One other thing to check is to make sure that your network drive, if you're on Windows, make sure that your network drive isn't being scanned by like an antivirus software like Windows Defender or kind of like a Norton type of virus protection, because that could sometimes slow down the process as well. All right. All right, just see a comment for Tommy C. Let me see if I could see his original question, if it's the one on. Okay, so I think we got that covered. All right, wonderful to see John Costigan from Kenosha, Wisconsin. Glad you can make it today. He says, this is the place to ask and learn. All right, so we see Blazer Bright, just from Kenya. He's an artist, music producer, and videographer, and graphics designer. So it's great to have you on the live stream. Wonderful to see Soren from Sweden. Glad you can make it. All right, so we see Masta LBC. Hi, Greg. When I insert a plugin, I have to click on E to have it appear. Where can I change that? All right, so let me just open up a particular plugin. All right, so let's say if I want to open up like an insert plugin, I think there is a preference for this, so we'll come here. So I open this up. All right, so that one, let me just see if it appears I was looking in the wrong spot. Okay, so I think that there is a preference for this. So let's come over here. Let me just look for it. Okay, so if you go to preferences, to VST, to plugins, there is a setting for open effect editor after loading it. So I'll just come here and hit OK. So if I go to open up, let's say that Revelation plugin, when I come here, we'll go to our reverb, to Revelation. The plugin isn't open, but again, go to your preferences, and we'll see open effect after loading it, open effect editor rather, after opening it. So we'll hit apply. Okay, so now as we go to add a particular plugin, the plugin window will open up automatically. So check that preference. All right, so we see Jay from Secret Studios says, hi Greg, I'm weighing between Cubase and Nuendo update. Site doesn't show Nuendo version 13 comparison, only version 12. Only version 12, but does for Cubase versions. Does Nuendo have additional musical audio features So yeah, most, I think the musical features will be identical. So it's going to have the additional audio features. So if you watched Aldo's live stream that he did on Wednesday, all of those features are kind of those post-production features of like the tonal match, the MPEG H, immersive support, and some of the other plugins, the game audio functions, network collaboration, more additional, importing of ADM files and multiple beds for your ADM files. Those things are kind of unique. So you could kind of, whatever features that you don't see listed, there may not be a Cubase 13 versus Nuendo 13, but maybe more of a Nuendo 12 versus Nuendo 13. But they're going to be, I'd say that the musical features are similar, but more audio and advanced post-production, ADR, those types of functions, where you could remove, like the tonal match stuff is pretty amazing to work with. And those things are going to be kind of Nuendo specific. I'll see if there is a list that is around somewhere if you want to email me at clubcubase@steinberg.de. All right, Dallas LaRue says, after the spectral layers extension has been added to a track, can that track be put into Very Audio when select spectral layers is the only thing that comes up? So, when we do, so let's take a look. I think that, once you add an extension that, so let's say if I come, I'll just jump back to my other project here. Because once we add an extension, it's basically converting the sample editor into, it's basically going to be converting this sample editor into the ARA extension. So it's kind of taking it into the editor. So if we come and let's just come here to select the track, and we'll come over here to no extension. So we could say, as we do spectral layers on this particular track, so we'll have it do its analysis here, that once that is done, the sample editor is now going to be in spectral layers, so it's running as an extension. So once you have, let's say, your spectral layers done, if you want to make the track extension permanent, you could do that once that's done. Or if you go to no extension, now we could come over to Very Audio and do the Very Audio editing. But when you're doing an ARA2 extension, it's basically going to, take, like, it's a handoff into another editing environment that goes back and forth versus something that's just, natural inside of Cubase. So you may have to make it permanent. All right, so we got a question from Patrick Mandeville A from India. His question is, I have a bunch of chords. How to strum all the selected chords, like select all, drag them to how much amount I strum. Is it possible? Okay, so let me just... So just come here to chord track. All right, so say if I come here to say chords to MIDI, so we could probably do, so generally what I do is just kind of grab this particular tool, and if you hold down kind of the alter option, you could do strums kind of like that, but But you might be able to make a logical editor to do this, where you could say, I won't spend a ton of time on this, but we'll see if we go to our logical editor, and we could say, let's set up, and we could say, we'll say type is equal to note, and the property is, we'll say context variable. And here we could say is the position in chord. So let's say we'll do, let's say, minor third. So let's say, okay, well, context variable equal to position in chord. And let's say we'll make this major third, and what we want to do is to create a position, and we want to add, let's say, a 16th note. So now what we could do is come over here. So let's say we select this chord, and then we should be able to take the third of the chords and move it over, take the fifths of the chords and move it over. So let's say, so, we could do one for each voice in the chord. So I could see if I could create this and have a macro to share so that it could be kind of automatically done. So we could do like the root note of the chord, the seventh, and just kind of, or as the notes increase, that these can just kind of be slightly shifted over for different strumming patterns. But you could also just kind of use strumming patterns from the chord pads as well. So if you want to send me an email, I could have that prepared for Tuesday's live stream. Okay, so we see from Sean Taylor, hi Greg, can you please try and change the color of the routing tabs in the mixer? I tried on Cubase 13 and can't seem to get them to change color. Green is what I like. Okay, so let's say if we go to our mixer here and you want routing, is it this tab that you want? Is this what you want colorized? So let me know if this is like this header here, the routing, if that's what you want colorized. Let's see if we go into preferences, mix console section colors. All right, so let's see if we go to routing. So let's see if we'll make this green, and we'll hit OK. So it doesn't look like it's taking that particular color. But let me know, Sean, if that's the color that you're looking for right there. And I'll just look at the preference again. It seems like I would think that that might change that settings. But Sean, let me know if that's what you're wanting to do. All right, so we see Mark Raven. It's also cold in Montana today, 6.667 centigrade. All right. Okay, so we see from Patrick Emanuel A. Can I see the video in slow motion while scoring to pick a spot for impact? Why picture is shrinking when we reduce tempo? What are methods composers use to tempo map for complex continued tempo changes? All right, so let's just start a video. I'll just do a new project here. Okay, so we'll go ahead and import a video. Okay, so now we have this video, and I'll just hide the audio track here. Okay, so notice that, depending upon we're going to come here and let's look at our video and say, okay, our video is roughly 2 minutes 47 seconds long. Okay, so we look at this. Now, when we want to look at our information in bars and beats, so I'm going to add a ruler track. So we'll add our ruler track and we'll set this to bars and beats. So right now we see that we're basically at 84 bars, 3 beats. So if we switch this to bars and beats, we're roughly a little longer than 84 bars and 3 beats. All right, so when I change the tempo, the bars and beats will change, but the length of the video is going to stay the same. So if we're at 120 beats now, I slow down the tempo, we could see that where my 84.3 beats is much different than where our video is. So we come back and we see that our video is still 2 minutes and 47 seconds, but now we are at a different measure. So as I adjust, and so the timing is still staying the same, but the bars and beats will change depending upon your tempo, because that's not an absolute time value. So right now we're at 31 beats a minute when we go to 44 beats a minute. So the video doesn't shrink. Your bars and beats are showing, are showing more time per bar and beat as the tempo slows down. So the absolute time is the same. And if we wanted to open up, our display, so let's say even if we go to supervision here, we'll just do a new instance of supervision to show this. So we will look at our time display and look at our time display again. All right, so let's say this one is going to be, we go to our settings, so let's say bars and beats. So I guess it's, so here I'll just, so as we again come here, we'll say, our bars and beats are, as we stay here, or, you know, say roughly 247, and we slow down, all right, and we go back to where our video was, we still see that's at the same time. So when you slow down, you have more measures in the same amount of time, and that's why you see that discrepancy. Okay, and we see, can I see the video in slow motion while scoring to pick a spot for impact? So the video is going to play back kind of at the same speed, and that's kind of what you want for the video. But if you wanted to easily kind of navigate within the video, just on the video window itself, you can just come and hold down the left mouse button and then just move. And you can say, I want it to be right at this particular transition. And then you could just come and say, okay, I need to put a hit right at this point. So that's how you could kind of, you know, navigate the video in slow motion. I think you have like a second forward or backward. So if you need to just, you know, isolate a particular section, you could just hold down the left mouse button on the video and just kind of scroll visually with that. All right, and third question, what are methods composers use to tempo map for complex continuous tempo changes? So what a lot of people will do is first, as they watch the video, you know, you can come over here. So let's say we have the video window open. So a lot of people, I know many composers,
beautiful spots to enjoy urban life. This is Hamburg, an independent historic harbor city. Hamburg prides itself on its cosmopolitan society and a thriving...
Right, so let's say, as we're doing this, a lot of composers may just like, okay, I'm watching the video, and they may start tapping and say, okay, just like how the video is, and maybe I just want to do like a tap tempo, just to get like maybe an overall vibe. So now you could tap your tempo, and that will show up in the tempo tracks in Cubase 13. So that way you could say, oh, it's around 104 beats a minute. What a lot of people do when they have a lot of complex time changes is they may play and say, okay, right at where we go to the guitar, I want to come here, and we see that as I move in the video that the playhead is updating as well. So we say, okay, we go to the guitar right here. So maybe I want to have a specific measure at that time. So we could go to our, what we call warp grid mode, and I could say, you know, measure 5 should be right at that point. And as we're going along, let's say I want the same tempo changes. Okay, I want the same tempo, and let's say maybe I want a tempo change right there where we go to the club. So I want to have music that sounds like we're in the club. So I'm going to come right here. We'll transition. Okay, we see the DJ in the club. Okay, so right at that particular point, I want that to be 8 measures. So I want that to fit. So I could just grab measure 13 and drag it right to that point. And now I could have a steady tempo between 2 points that were set in the video. And the tempo just does all of the automatic calculation. So you could do your hit points, line it up and say, okay, from here to here, I want 4 measures of music, or I want 8 measures of music, and just simply drag and create the tempo changes based on the video like we've seen. So those are a couple of tricks that you could do for video editing or working with video in your Cubase. All right, we have Alexander Plasko checking in from Connecticut. Thanks for joining us. All right, so we have a question. If you have generated harmony voices, how can you change soprano to tenor, for example? Okay, so Let me just open up a different project. Let's see if it's in my recent project list here. Doesn't look like it. All right, so let me just open it up. All right, so we'll open this up and say we've done harmony voice, and it maybe gave us an alto and we want it to be, or soprano, and we want to switch that to tenor. So I'm going to first select this event, and let's go to the project menu, and I'm just going to create chords from the events. Okay, and now that we've done that, I'm going to select a particular phrase right here. So I'm just going to say this note, I want to generate a harmony voice. So we'll go to my audio menu, and since we know what the chords are, we can say let's generate a single harmony voice, and it's now generated that for us. So if we listen to it. All right, so when we do this, we're going to select the track, and then when we go into the inspector, we're going to go to chords, and we're going to tell it, so I think we need to tell it to not follow. So let's see if we come here. All right, so we have this. Yeah, let's try just putting a tenor now. So let's say, okay, I want it to be soprano. And alto. Tenor. Now, I think in version 12 and earlier, you might have had to tell it to tell it not to follow the chord track, but I think this is new in version 13, that when you do this and you just change the voice, that will automatically, that it does it for you automatically. So it's a new thing in 13 I just learned, but you may have to tell it, I think in the old inspector there was something where you could just unlock it from the chords, and that way you could change the harmonies, which voicing it was using for the harmonies. Okay, so you see Patrick Mainovel A just says on beat design, I see an option called jump now. How to use that and why it's there. Okay, so let's go back to my other project. Okay, so what jump allows you to do is to switch between different patterns, because the beat designer can have multiple patterns. So let's come over here to, I think we have the beat designer on this particular sound. So let me just come here, go to our MIDI inserts. Okay. So when we were playing this, we can now just say, and let me make sure that this isn't playing its own pattern. Okay. Okay, let me just. Okay. All right, so let me just load it up from scratch here. All right, so, these jump modes were always there. So what you could do is tell it when we switch patterns to jump now, or we could have this kind of switch to, if we wanted to jump at different, let's see where this is, but if we had it, let's say if I click now to play a different pattern in the middle, it would change the pattern when it finished the pattern. So if I do it right at the beginning, it waits until the next pattern starts and does that. And if we click on jump now, we can just switch immediately to our different patterns. So that's what the jump mode allows you to do, is just to switch between different patterns. So it's a function that was always there, just maybe wasn't, it was right in the menu that a lot of people may have missed, which is why they put it out front. All right, so we see Mark Rabin is indicating his dog Stella is happy and wants to go swim. That's great. All right, so Brent Hendrick asks, hey Greg, is it possible to hide the solo button in the mix console window? I want to make it harder to solo when mixing. So I don't think it's possible to hide the solo button. So I realize sometimes it could be tempting to just constantly solo. But yeah, I don't think it's visible. It's capable of being hidden. So maybe, it could be one of those things. I know it's hard maybe to not constantly solo different aspects. Maybe use the listen bus, but I think it's always going to be visible. And if we had it where it was, the option to make it invisible, people would be unhappy that they can't find the solo button. So I think it's kind of fixed. All right, so we see Bob Ferreira says, always watching, always learning. Thank you. So thanks for being on. All right, so we see from Patrick Mandeville a question. Is there an option for pad focus on Groove Agent to see what sample was played on the pad? It's showing on single slot, but it's not showing multiple slot where in which each sample is played on. All right, so let's take a look. So let's say if we are here and we open up the instrument. All right, so if we click, I want to say it's this little MIDI Follow on off and select layers using a MIDI controller. So let's say if I had, I may not have, let me just drag some multi-samples in on this kit here, just to kind of show this function. Okay, so what I want to do is I'm going to select so let's say I have 8 kicks all on this particular pattern. So when I go to, so if we activate, this will show us the MIDI follow and this will show us the layers. So once we turn those on, as soon as I And I'll just put this on, just check. So, so at this point, we could just see which particular layer. So I just, dragged 8 kicks in. So once we have this enabled, we could see which velocity and which sample is being triggered. So I'll just reread the question. Is there an option to pad focus group to see what samples playing a pad is showing in a single slot, but it's not showing multiple slot where each sample is played on for pads? So if I come, so if I'm here, we go to, let's say, this bank. If I hit multiple keys, I could see those. So if we could see just the light indicating that there's MIDI, but if we want to see the outline, just click right there. And if we have, multiple samples on a particular pad, then we could, that will show you which velocity layer is being triggered. So let me know if that's helpful and what you want to see, Patrick. All right, so we see Martin just passing on a test, says inspect layers 10 Pro, says don't forget to check system preferences, miscellaneous, AI processing / device in spectral layers for enabling GPU processing if you have a supported graphics card. So. Okay, so we see from Sei says I upgraded from Cubase 12, but my download assistant keeps showing install again after installing Cubase 13, and I can't see my loop. So if once it's installed, so I'll open up my download assistant here. So once it's been installed, if you want to install it again, so let's say at this point, if you go to another computer, but you're still logged into your My Steinberg account, all you'd have to do is at that point, okay, you could be logged into your My Steinberg account on a different computer and install, and it shows that you have installed it on one of your computers. So I'm sure I'll just get mine updated here. All right. Okay. It says after installing Cubase 13, I can't see my loop. All right, let me just get this, sorry. So you should see the loops, and we'll just get this update going. So when it says install again, it just means that it has been installed, and you could reinstall it, but it's just kind of indicating to you that, if you go to my products here, so let's say we go to Cubase 13, so I could install it again. So, if you see the loops, these, I think the first 5 are the new loops. So see if they're installed, and they should just show up in your media bay when you get to loops and content. So you should see them like cinematic. This is one of the new loop sets. So after you kind of work with those, and if you don't see them showing up, you could check your Steinberg library assistant. One of the things you could do is, and this is a little utility or the Steinberg library manager. So make sure that you'll see when you go to Cubase window, you should see all the loops here. Make sure that they were downloaded into the right spot. Or you can go to your media bay, see if they're listed here, and then right click. So say cinematic, electronic, just right click here and rescan disk. And one of those three methods should make them show up for you. Great, sorry, sorry, just my chat field jumped to me. All right, so I think I'm in the neighborhood. Okay, so we see from Patrick Mandeville A asks, on part editing mode and key editor mode, all parts, all parts inactive. What's the difference? Why there's a ping option in editor to all three the same? What makes them different? Okay, so let's take a look. Okay, so let's say I want to edit multiple events here. Okay, so a lot of times people may enter the editor by clicking on one single event. So, and we can have our different modes here. So let me just, so we can see, okay, I want to edit all parts. Now, when I click here, we can now edit these different parts, or when we're in the visibility editor where we see a square, now all of the parts are visible, so that as we hover over and we could select different parts, we don't necessarily, all of those parts are visible, so we could click on the parts themselves to activate them like that. So this is if we have multiple parts like on the same track. When we want to just do only the active part, then so let's come here, we'll just do, let's say, maybe a guitar part instead. So we can edit only like the active parts. So if we want to, have multiple events, this is where this comes in handy. And then our third option is all parts on the active track, and that's kind of where we see that little square. So let's say if we select our quartet, let's see if we, we could now, have these different parts again, so that those will be active. So a lot of times I think people would just choose to all parts on active track, and at that point you could just, select the track here and make that the active one. All right, so we see JVI on. Glad you could make it. And he says thanks for these hangouts, and wishing everyone a good evening and that everyone's doing well. All right, so we see from Patrick Emmanuel A, is this option available in Cubase and MIDI Editor? I should see other note shade, but I should only move selected tracks notes because I'm accidentally moving a lot of things. It would be great. So, just think about like when you, as we select kind of, different events, so everything could be visible. One of the things that you could do, so let's say if we're looking at, our grand piano here, And let me just hide the note expression data here. So let's say we're looking at our piano part, and let's say, okay, I want to see, my bass part. Now, one of the things that you could do that might help, because you want the flexibility of like, oh, I'm here, I want to edit this note, or okay, I want to take the bass and be able to kind of switch between the different notes, and we could choose to colorize, based on the particular events. But this way, just it'll make sure that you have access to both different parts. So one thing that you might want to do, I think there's a preference to make it more obvious. Let's say if we go to event display MIDI, let me see if it's inactive note event intensity. So if I take that down, any of the events that are inactive, we can see that their intensity will be diminished. So it could be more obvious which is your active part. So try playing around with that preference. And also if you just come over here and say you want to do colors by parts, so you can say this is the piano, this is when I come here, this color is going to be the bass, or we can now look at the guitar, it's going to be green, my piano will be orange, stuff like that. So that way you're less apt to make a mistake. Okay, so Michael Graybill asks, hi Greg, CC Lane question. When I copy pasting only the first data point to an earlier position, nothing happens. Now it only works if multiple points are copied or with the awesome range tool. Thanks. Okay. So you might need, let me just add a part here. So let me just add a MIDI track. And it might be just kind of the nature of I'll just draw in some modulation. All right, so let's look at it larger here. Okay, so let's say if I so it looks like, let's say if I take that point and I hold down Alt or Option key, looks like it's inactive. But let me look at it in the list editor. Out of curiosity. So it looks like the modulation data was added. It doesn't seem like it's active for some reason. I'll play around with that some more, but let me just, let's say if we have the range tool here, but it looks like, just grabbing like these nodes and that those kind of get painted over. It kind of looks like it's there, but I'll do some more playing around with that. But again, you could use the range tool for that in the meantime. Okay, so we see a question from Patrick Manuel A. Why there is a step input in a chord pad and how to use it creatively? Because a lot of people would have a chord pad set up and they wanted to populate the chord track based on the chord pad. So let's say if we are here, we'll activate this project, we'll open up let's say we have chord pads. So we'll jump to our chord pads, and now I want to populate, make a lead sheet, for example. So I'm here, I'm going to activate the step input, and I'll just come here. So, okay, I want it to be C, and then we'll go to F, and then we'll go to G chord, back to C. I need to go to an A minor, let's say E minor, F, G, and then C. So, this way, instead of having to drag from the chord pads to the project, we could just do step entry for the chord pads, and that's kind of really the intention of it. Okay, so we see Eric McCann says, "Hi Greg, I cannot get any image, sounds, roots reggae, and others to appear in the new Steinberg Activation Manager and Steinberg's new licensing system. Image Sound says it's a Steinberg problem." All right, so let's take a look and see if those are under Steinberg licensing. All right, so look under sound content. So look for the roots reggae. So I don't see it listed there. So I'm not sure. I could send a message over the weekend to see if I get a clarification. I'm not sure, if it's up to us to do the license conversion, or if it's done in conjunction with the company. But I could find out for you to see if the roots reggae and some of the other image line sounds. But you could obviously see that, lots of the other sounds and instruments have all kind of migrated over to that. So I'll see if I could get a clarification. I'm not sure if it's Image Line that's supposed to do that, since it's their content and we're kind of more of the marketplace for it, or if we do that. I would think it would be the company that manufactures it, and we're just kind of really the distribution source for it. But I'm not absolutely positive on that, but I will send an email and see if I get a clarification. All right, so we see from Patrick Mandeville A, says, "Greg, on the chord pad snap playback to grid option, there is only up to 16th note. What if we need 30-second grids? Is there a reason, or is it a bug?" So, I played, and this is something I couldn't figure out a little while ago in the chord pads, was I had to snap playback to musical mode off when I just needed to right-click in this area. So this goes down to 16th notes. So I don't know of any piece of music I know that's changing chords on every 32nd note. So I played lots of charts in my career. I've never seen chords that were changing every 32nd note. But I could understand if there's a piece that's doing it, but I think practically, let me know if you have a composition that's changing chords every 32nd note. Love to hear it. But if you need that, so I think practically, most people don't need to change chords at a higher rhythmic division than 16th notes. So it could be just kind of a practical thing. Theoretically, we do 128th notes with chord changes, but is any composition really changing notes every 32nd note? I would think not. So. All right, so we see just Question: when you change the chord pad's voicing, it doesn't change the surrounding chords to be in key. Is there a way to fix that? So, if you change the voicings on the chords, so let's say if I come and I wanted to select multiple pads here. So let me just... All right, so let's say if I come here and then we could activate, and let me just see if I could deactivate, get my right modifier key. I thought it was... So, it could be like when we come, and let's say I want to come here and we want to change the voicing. So I'll select all my pads, and it could be just that maybe you have to activate the adaptive voicing. So when you come here and we make changes, that we could make those changes across multiple. So now if we want to just do that type of stuff, or if we want to do different tensions. So it could be that you need to activate the adaptive voicing for the selected pads. And then you could do that. So give that a try. All right, so we see from Ian how to use Meta Flanger. So I'm not sure if that's a Steinberg product. I don't think it is a Steinberg product. So I'll just look under the modulation. So we just have Flanger. So I don't see a Meta Flanger. So maybe it's a third-party plugin, and I'm not familiar with it, but I don't think it's a Steinberg product. All right, wonderful to see Jean-Marie Horvat on. All right, so we see, hi Greg, as a person who's still new in the DAW learning, would you advise me to stay on 12 or move to 13? I think there's a lot of really significant workflow improvements that could make, if you're going to be learning, you're probably making an investment of your knowledge and your time. So I think that the workflow enhancements that come with 13 can really benefit your workflow. So I think it's worth jumping up to, just to have the new editing options to get Iconica Sketch. There's, so many great, wonderful features, new plugins. So I think it's definitely a worthy update. All right, so we see from Lawrence Koch, says, hello from Rhode Island. Did you get my follow-up email about the group channel visibility? Seems to be related to the zone the groups are in. Right away, they don't hide, and in the center, they do. So yeah, I did do that, and I kind of sent a report off on this, and we'll show it for everyone's benefit. So to see if there was any logic in it, because I noticed that did it in the lower zone, or it wouldn't hide correctly in the lower zone, but in the main mix console it seemed to. So those that aren't familiar, we'll go to our mix console, and what Lawrence had sent in was that the visibility wasn't being applied when tracks were fixed in like the left or right zone. So let's say if we come and we go to our editor zones, that we have particular tracks that are anchored, let's say audio 08 and group 2 that are anchored. Now when we go back to the tracks and we try to hide like audio 08, that it doesn't hide. But if we're in the center zone, let's say group 1, that will be hidden from the mixer or shown in the mixer. But if we go to group 2, which is anchored to the right side, that doesn't seem to hide. But if we go into the mix console, that the dedicated mix console, and we anchor these zones. So let's say group 2, and now we hide group 2, that those will hide kind of as expected. So so I did report that, Lawrence, so hopefully and I noticed it's the same in version 12. I'm not sure if there was a particular logic to it, but I did send a report in on that. So sorry about that, and it could be annoying. All right, so I see from Ian just says this is Cubase 12 Pro, so it's probably my project that is in Cubase 13 that was made in Cubase 12 Pro. So sometimes you may just notice that on the title bar here, it may say, Cubase 12 Pro project or something like that. So, but I'm running Cubase 13. All right, so we see from Nuendo 2496, hi, I select a color for the event I'm about to record. When recording the event remains the color I chose. When I stopped recording, the event turns black. Can I set it not to turn black? All right, so let me just do a new project here. We'll test it. All right, so I'm going to add an audio track. Okay, we'll set a color. And to set colors, this is new in 13. You can set it by holding down the scroll wheel plus the Alt Option key. So I will come over here and hit record. Okay, and as we do this, we'll see that the event is blue. All right, so now let's say when I stop, all right, it turns black. That just means that it's selected. So try to just click somewhere else, and then it's like select it when you so if it turns black, just try clicking elsewhere, and that just maybe it's just when you see the black, it's indicating that that particular event is selected. So if we come, we just punch out. So say we punch. And punch out. So that event is selected. So try just clicking anywhere else, and I think your event will have the same color. So let me know if that's what you're running into. All right, so we see it's probably Cage or Kaje Elworth from Ireland, just saying thanks for all you do. So thanks for being on the live stream. I'm sure I pronounced your name wrong. So I just saw a video today on how everyone in America mispronounces Irish names. So I'm sure I'm guilty of the stereotype now. But we're glad that you could be on the live stream. And all right, and we see Dr. Ayman from Home Studio World from Jordan. Glad you can make it. Okay, so we see Patrick Manuel A asks, I know we can drag a pattern to the chord track play and play that, but can we do it in reverse, like a chord played already? Is there a way to insert my own pattern now, like straight chords, and change into chord pattern? All right, let me make sure I'm understanding this. So he says, we know we can drag a pattern into chord track, play that, but can we do it in reverse, like the chord played already? Is there a way to insert my own pattern now, like straight chords change into chord pattern? If you are using, not from the chord tracks, I don't think, but let's say if we have if we have chords that, depending on what the pattern is, so let's say if we add an instrument track, all right, so let's say if we have this as some of the MIDI plugins, we could do that, but I don't think we could do it from the particular pattern. But I guess we could, if we take that pattern, all right, so let's come here and let's find just a quick, let me just load up a different instrument here. So we have chords on it. I think you could do this with Apache SX. Okay, so let's say if I have a pattern, okay, so let's say I'll just do keyboard. Okay, so let's say I have this as a pattern, and let's say I have chords, so I'm going to add a chord track. All right, so this is our add a chord track. Okay, so I'll come here. So let's say we have just the chords. So I'm going to chords to MIDI on that particular event. So let's say I want to open up on this track the Apache SX MIDI insert. All right, and we'll see the sequence. So if I want this sequence, we could drop the MIDI part there. And now, as we do this, so we could take that pattern and just drop it into so we don't have to use the chord pads for that, but just take that same pattern, drop it into our Apache SX. And now if I want, we can go to MIDI to freeze MIDI modifiers, and now we could see all of the data that was from this particular pattern. So while this pattern could be used for the chord track, the same pattern could be used for the Apache SX that you could manipulate. So you could take, chords that are just kind of block chords and take those patterns and convert it just that easily. So let me know if that's helpful for you, Patrick. Okay, Patrick asks, is there a way to easily scroll across samples on Drum Editor? We have C1, C2, but can I set my C5 sample to C1 on Drum Editor easily? Easy workflow, the way to easily select wanted samples to go through. All right, so let's say if we're looking at this in Drum Editor. So we'll go to our MIDI menu to open drum editor. Okay. So let's say if we have like these notes down here, I think we could just drag the particular drum editor events visually to get those to line up. So you say, okay, I want those on top. So we could treat it just like that. Also, you know, one of the cool things you could do in the drum editor is to, you know, show only drum sounds with events, and then you could filter out other stuff. But, you know, if you know that you have different sounds, and you could audition, you know, different sounds just by clicking here on a drum editor, and that will sound the note, and then you could visually drag it to where you want. All right, so wonderful to see Michael Teams from Weatherford, Texas, and he wants people to whack the like buttons. All right, and we see Nick from Essex in the UK. He just came in to press the like button. He has to go collect his son now. Maybe he may be back later. So we hope your son had a great 10th birthday. Thanks for joining us. All right, so we see how do I connect to Cubase IC Pro, and there an update coming to the app. So there was an update recently to it, but you know, once you come over here, you would just say, okay, you want to go to your studio setup, and you'll see, I think you could just come over here, and I think you'll see just the, is it the Steinberg SKI remote? And then you could enable authentication, and then basically your computer needs to be on the same Wi-Fi network as your IC Pro. But yeah, it was recently updated, and it also takes advantage. It's also running on Android as well as iOS. So, but yeah, there was recent updates to that, but it will need to do it over your Wi-Fi network for your phone. Okay, so we see from Home Studio World, question, is there a way to invert dynamics? I mean, minimum level is max and vice versa. If yes, then I have a suggestion to sidechain to compress vocal at soft parts as a reverse fun. Thanks. You know, I mean, generally the sidechain signal is going to, you know, the level of the signal determines how much of the sidechain. So I don't know, and there could be, I'm not familiar with like an inverted sidechain that does that. You know, a lot of people may just flip what is being sidechained, and you know, you take what your sidechain input was, and you know, on to source, and then just, you know, you could try flipping those as well, and that may give you inverted functions like that. All right, so we have a question from Patrick Emanuel A. On Beat Designer, can I change timing for each separate sample, like kick play on 4, hi-hat play in triplets, like that? Each individual samples play on different time signatures. So it'd be the same time signature, but you could have different pulses. So I don't think that the Beat Designer will do that, but you could do it really easily in the drum editor. So let's say if I had, you know, we'll just add a quick groove agent part. So a lot of people miss this in the drum editor and underutilize the drum editor, but let's just okay. Okay, so if we want to do this in the drum editor, you know, here what we could do is just say, okay, I want So say as I come here, I want, my kick to be in quarter notes. So as I drag across, my kick will be quarters. I want my snare to be eighth notes. So now as I drag across, I want my rim shot to be eighth note triplets. I want, my tom to be 30-second notes, etc. So you could do this quite easily, different divisions inside of we want dotted quarter notes for the hi-hat. So it's really easy to do this inside of the drum editor already. So, Beat Designer is going to be more of a traditional grid. That's kind of the intention of it, to mimic existing paradigms. But, you could do that easily just by changing your snap value in the drum editor for multiple events. All right, wonderful to see Brian Sawyer, Senior from Bealville, North Carolina. Hope you're well. Okay, and we have Madge Deepers checking in from the UK, so glad you can make it today. All right, so you see Sean Taylor just saying no to the buttons, but I'm not. Maybe if you give me a little more context. All right, let me see if I could scroll back and find the first question. It's probably 30 questions ago. Let me see if I could reference it quickly. Okay, so this is with the routing tabs in the mixer. Okay, so it says no the button, so let me just all right, let me just look for okay, so all right, so I'm back where I was. So say if it's the buttons, so let's come over here to our mixer. So I think you said the routing tab if you want. Let me just see if it's on. So I think the question was like the routing tab. So, but maybe if you could let me know which exact buttons. I think your example before was the routing tab. But let's say if we come over here to like our channel strip inserts. So sorry about that, Sean, for missing that. Okay, so we see. Further clarification from Sean. It says the routing selection tabs for input and output. It worked for Cubase 12. So let's say if we pop over here for. Okay, so let's say if we come, so we see the routing here. So let's see if we go back to the preferences. All right, and let me see if it's just in like the routing. Let's go to an audio track here. So I'm not sure if it's like these buttons, or maybe if you could email me a screenshot, Sean. Sorry for being dense on my part. Or if it's just these that you want to see. So, but yeah, if you want to send me a screenshot, maybe if you want to email it to me, I could keep my eye out throughout the live stream. All right, so we have Eric Sampson checking in from Paris. Thanks for joining us. All right, so we see from Masta LBC, thanks Greg for the great tips. I have a plugin freezing Cubase. It's a pretty popular one. Can I do something like clearing the plugin cache in Cubase? I would like to try new fresh installation. So if you uninstall it, Cubase, and if it doesn't see it in the VST3 folder, then Cubase won't reference it. It may be referenced by like a licensing system. Sometimes I see programs on iLock that do that. But uninstalling it, I don't think it'll be left in a cache if the plugin is uninstalled. Cubase shouldn't see it. And if you want to email me with what the plugin is, I'd be happy to kind of do some research on it too. All right, so we see Wolfgang Meyer-Schmidt just checking in from Hamburg, Germany. I miss going to Hamburg. One of my favorite cities to visit. So thank you for being on the live stream, joining us this evening. All right, so we see Eric Sampson says, the well-known tiny mouse pointer bug still present in Cubase 13. It happens on Windows 10 with 4K screens. The mouse pointer in a project zone is super small. When Steinberg is going to fix it? So it's probably just mimicking whatever, function that you have, size that you have for your mouse, so if you go to a 4K resolution, I would think that the mouse pointer size, you should be able, I know I'm not on Windows 10, but, I just went into, someone asked a couple live streams ago if I could take the mouse pointer and make it larger so it's easier for people to follow on the live streams, and that was something I did in the operating system. So I'm not sure if you have the program, if you go to the Windows version and go to Preferences and go to General, you'll see high DPI settings. So let me know if you're scaling at your operating system or scaling within the application. But, sometimes people get upset when their 4K resolution looks small, and that's, why you're running 4K, to see more data. So, but you might be able to scale it. So let us know if you're doing any scaling on it. So you could scale in the operating system or scale inside of Cubase. All right, so we see Joe asks, is there a keyboard shortcut to close all plugin windows? It's available under the Windows menu, but it would be great to do it quick with a keyboard shortcut. So I think you can assign it. So let's go to your key commands, and we could look under the Windows menu. So we'll come here, and you'll see close all plugin windows. So there isn't one by default that's assigned, but you can assign one just to close all the plugin windows. So, or you could do it through the MIDI remote if needed as well. All right, so we see, hi Greg, can I set my supervision near my meter? Like I always want to always see the instrument spectrum, whether it's low or it's high, so that I can select instruments wisely. So a lot of times what, I've seen people do, like they could have it in the control room or in the meter section. So let's say, okay, and if we go to like our plugins. Let's say we go to inserts on our control room, and we click on our inserts tab. Let's say we open up supervision, and I want to just switch this to like a spectrum bar. So let's say, as you play, you see the spectrum bar. So what I've seen a lot of people do is just kind of leave this kind of anchored over in the right hand zone like this, and you could see, like, go to your meters tab, and then you could see meters and still have this kind of placed right there and have that always visible over top of the control room. Okay, so we have a question from Prematron. Hey Greg, hope you're well. So I'm doing great, thank you. I have an issue with the hub. Upon startup, I can only see the recent projects, and the left side with the hub is missing. Is there a fix? So usually, when we open up the hub, we'll say, come here, this will connect. So make sure that you have an internet connection. This will need to have an internet connection. Sometimes, I know in the past, I'm not sure if it's still the case, if your default browser, with something maybe like Firefox, that might have an impact as well. But I know that there's a lot of people that run their DAW not connected to the internet for, stability reasons. And if it's not connected to the internet, that left side of the hub won't show up. That's making kind of an active connection to the internet for that. All right, we see David M. from Liverpool on. Glad you can make it this evening. Mimi Koss asks, hello, every time I drag a chord from the chord pads to the chord track, it changed the voicing. Can I have the same exact chord without changing anything? So, realize that each of the tracks themselves can have different voicings. So when we have the chord here, we can think of this as dragging the chord, and each track could have, independent voicings. So, if you keep these settings the same as as your chord pad voicings, then they will sound the same. But realize that each track, because you may want to have different voicings for piano versus guitar versus an orchestral sound. So each track itself can override voicings. So make sure that you have, those settings matched between the two. All right, so we see from Ness, who asks, hi Greg, when I use chord pads, it's always a full bar, and I drag it in. How can I make it half bar or fourth bar? Greetings, Ness. Okay, so let's say I have my chord track here. I'm going to set my snap, my grid here. We'll set it to, I'll just set this to bars and beats. So I'll just say, let's make it beat. And I'll zoom in. So let's say, okay, I want this on measure beat 2. I want this chord on beat 4. So if I change my snap to bar at this point, I can only drag it to the bar. But if we change our snap position to beat, then I could drag it to a particular beat. Or we could say use quantize. I guess if we needed to do a 30-second note chord change, we could do that as well. So it looks like it just follows the grid snap settings. So try to set that to beat as opposed to bar. And let me know if that helps. Okay, so you see Patrick Vanderbilt A says, thank you, Greg, for a brief and wonderful explanation. So I hope it's helpful. All right, so we see, hi Greg, is it possible to change the GUI theme back to how it was in Cubase 12? So, there's, probably millions of lines of code with the new GUI, so it's not a light switch that can be flipped back. I know for me at first, it was, so it was a little disconcerting, and now when I go back to 12, I'm like, I was like, oh, I can't really see where mute and solo is on the mixer. People are like, oh, it's too bright, but now you can clearly see everything, And even Jean-Marie Horvat, I see his comments just, within a few messages here. We were talking yesterday on the phone, and he was just saying how much he loved the new design, how clear everything was. So, I know at first it could start off, and anything that's different, we may dislike, but to me, going after working in 13 for a couple months, going back to 12, I don't like it nearly as much, and I really prefer how the legibility and the clearness of the functions are in Cubase 13. But there isn't a way to jump back to Cubase 12 mode. All right, wonderful to see Jeff Sabelski checking in from Chico, California. All right, and we have Forward Thinker checking in from Wales in the UK. All right, wonderful to see Bruce Bruton on from Simi Valley. He says, hi, I've been away for a while, just got 13 Pro, and wow, I've got a lot to learn. Hey, everyone, how's everyone doing today? Checking in from Simi Valley. So wonderful to see you back on, and thanks for popping in. Great to see you back. All right. Okay, so you see K1 Classic asks, hi, is there a way to map Groove Agent or sampler track start and end point to a controller? Okay, so if we have, let's say, a sampler track, so let me just come over. And you can see, like here, as we listen to it, you can see the metering. All right, so I'm going to map this to sampler track. So, all right, so once we come in here, we could put it into like continuous. So, so let me just. So this way we could have it just kind of. But let's say if we do like, if we do just play once, let me just see, I think there's one-shot mode. So you could just hit a key and it will automatically play to the end. So you say, okay, a way to map Groove Agent or sampler track start and end point to a controller. So I'm not sure if it's like, if you want this to be mapped. Let me just see if there is a key. Like, we'll come here to the MIDI remote. So I guess maybe you want to take like the start time here. And let me just take off one shot. If you want to take this particular start time, let me just take a new sample. So if you want this line to be controlled by a controller, I think it might have to be done with the mouse, but let's see if we can do it in the MIDI remote. I don't see it. So if it's, do you want this to be, if we go to the sampler track here, if you want this, like these to be controlled from a controller, let me just see if I, I don't know of a way to do that, but let me just, wrong. So I don't know of a way to do it. I'll play around with it some more to see, but it doesn't look like, I don't know a way off the top of my head if that's what you want to do, if you want to map that with the controller. I think most people tend to use the mouse as being a little more precise. But I could do, if that's it, send me an email to clubcubase@steinberg.de, and I'd be happy to investigate further and see if we get an answer for Tuesday. So we see a question, were the MIDI inserts, Beat Designer, for example, redesigned with new functionality, or was it just a paint job, or for lack of a better word, thing? So a lot of it was visual enhancements. There were some stuff that was added, so like one of the things that people had wanted in previous versions, and this was asked on several live streams, people that wanted to use the mouse scroll wheel to scroll between different presets. That wasn't in there before, and so now that functionality is in there. So some of the things, like, people are like, oh, there's a new feature in this one, and it was just something that was maybe hidden in previous versions, or not as obvious. So the redesign is maybe brought to attention some features that people weren't aware of, but it's primarily a cosmetic and redesign. All right, we see Michael Teams is thankful for Uno Momento's cold brew. Seems like a good thing on a Friday afternoon or evening. All right, so we see, Greg, can you instruct on print to track when using analog processing? So if it is set up, so let's say if we have, an audio file here, so let's say I have an audio file here, and we want, if we have the processing that's set up, if we go to your studio, to audio connections, and we go to external effects, we can now come over here. So let's say we have these connected to our audio interface or our converter. At that point, what we're able to do is say, okay, we're going to go out of output 3 to go into this compressor and feed it into input 3 of the audio interface. Once that is done, we can come over and we can just say, okay, let's go to the inserts, and we'll see, okay, let's go to our external plugin. So I want it to be my finalizer, and we could compensate for the latency there. And then all we would have to do is to freeze the track. It would freeze it in real time because it needs to pass the signal to the hardware. But if you freeze the track, if it's connected, at that point you could just simply, render the file with that particular processing on it. So at that point, it's treated much like a VST plugin, except when we do a render, it has to do it in real time because that's how the hardware is going to react. All right, so Larry B asks, have you seen project corruptions with Cubase 13? I got my first ever corruption upgrade from Pro 12 to Pro 13, Windows 10. Project was created initially in 12 Pro. Can I recover with no backup? by default, so I think now one of the new things was when it senses like a plugin is crashing and it's corrupting the project, you'll get a message. And that's new. So you'll get the message saying, okay, this project is getting corrupted, and you could save it under a different name instead of saving the project. And usually it kind of gives you that message so that if you save it under the new name, you could save. The intention is this is when there's an issue with this project that's causing corruption, so save it as a backup, and then you can just simply revert back to your previously saved project or do a backup. By default, Cubase will be creating .bak files in the background. So if you go to your preferences to general, you could have Cubase automatically be on autosave mode, and usually by default I think it's every 10 minutes it'll be creating a backup, and then you could just recall that. Often what you could do is, if you saved it under a different name, is to start a new project and import the tracks. Use the import tracks from project, load up the backup or the alternately saved version, and come to say import tracks from project. So I think before if a project was getting corrupted from a third-party plugin, that you wouldn't get a notice and you could save it and then not open it. So when it's detecting that a plugin or a third-party component is causing that, then it's going to prompt you to save an alternate version so that you don't save a corrupt project in the new version, and you could just have it saved as a backup. So okay, so we see from Eric Fox, hello Greg, is it possible to time stretch video with the audio, speed up and slow down video with the audio track? So we don't do any time compression of the video. So generally when people are composing to media, they need the video to stay absolutely the same. They don't need the video to be changed. So if you needed to do time compression on a video, do that within a video program. But for 99% of people that are scoring the video, will never want the video touched from the original video asset that they've received from their client. So we don't do time compression of video. Okay, thanks for all the great questions. Still reading through. All right, so Sam Smith asks, hi, how can I search for all, let's say, my bass presets for all my VSTs in Media Bay, but for instruments only and all the VSTIs at once? Okay, so let's say we want to look for bass sound. So let's open up our Media Bay. So what I'm going to do is say, okay, I want to look for, we'll just say a plugin preset. So we'll just say, okay, I want to come for plugin presets, and we could say we want these to be, just close this, sorry. And we can say, I want this to be bass, and I want it to be synth bass. And now I could see all of my synth bass sounds from all of my different projects. So realize that if you have third-party plugins that don't do VST3 names, they may not show up in this list, and that's kind of the benefit of having these names so that everything can be unified within one particular interface. But that's a way you could do it inside of Media Bay. So choose what type of plugin, effects chain, audio files. So we're going to do plugin presets, and then we go to the attributes, say bass. I want this to be acoustic bass. I want this to be electric bass, other synth bass. And you can now just kind of go back and forth and see all of the tagging where you can kind of surgically filter for your different devices. All right, so we see a comment from Patrick Emmanuel A. Greg, thank you so much. The great thing about Cubase is not Cubase weekly live streams, but not every other DAW provides that. So we try to make sure that people are using our software better. People are using the software better, then they're usually happier. So we see just comment. Now we have internet YouTube, so we are learning things. How about those days? How will normal people, even professionals who use Cubase, will know about things? How to do, what to do, I wonder. So, it's just like how you learned anything before, So, obviously with YouTube, it's, and just the resources that are available are so incredible. And, I could think back like when I was learning how to play bass 40 years ago, and think about like, okay, I need to learn this song because the band is adding it, but no one has a recording of it, and we couldn't afford to go to the record store to buy a record or have one person buy the record and buy cassettes, so sometimes we would have to, call a local radio station, try to get it requested, and you go to like a really local, like, a very regional show, and you could request and maybe record, and then you'd have to learn, and then maybe someone else could figure something out, and you go to their house and they would show you a trick, and you just kind of would exchange information that way. But I think, so I think people still do that, There's a lot of people I see composer wise, like I could look at someone's setup and say, oh, you worked at remote control at Hans Zimmer's studio because you have your setup just like he does, because this is his workflow and it works really well for composing for film. And they'll have almost the same identical setup, the same keyboard controller, and and it's a known entity through years of experience, and people will share that. And I think it's important, for anyone that knows a lot on a subject to share your knowledge on this subject. So I think we should appreciate that, we're able to learn in this method and be connected now. So, all right, we see Val Yuan says he finally got the UR extension firmware updates. Since then, his dropouts have been resolved. So it's great news. Wonderful to see you in values from Vienna, Austria. Thanks for joining us. All right, so we have Justin Lewa checking in from Kenya. Glad you could make it today. We see the Heartbreak Time Machine says he has smashed the like button, and Larry B says like smashed completed. So that's good. And if you do learn a new tip or trick, make sure you hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. Okay, so we see John Patterson asks, it says, I have an audio drum file that I tempo detected, selected the downbeat, and did advanced audio set definition from tempo. Shut off the tempo track, but there's a strange tempo speed up when I play. Okay, so we'll show this feature for those that aren't familiar with it. Okay, so let me just... doesn't want me to do that project for some reason. All right. Let's do a different one, sorry. Okay, here we go. Okay, so just go back to this. Audio drum file, tempo detected, selected the downbeat, and did advanced audio set definition for tempo. Shut off the tempo track, and there's a strange tempo speed up when play. All right, so what happens, it's not necessarily shutting off the tempo track to what you need to do. So let's say I have my file here is not relating to the click track at all. So I'm going to select it. I'll go to my project, and we'll choose our tempo detection. All right, I'm going to do an offbeat correction here. All right, so I'm going to close this. Let's find my downbeat. I want to set my signature. So my downbeat's going to be right there. I'll set this to bars and beats. Okay, so now all right, so if I want to play this, what we want to do now is to just say, we'll go to our audio to advanced, and we'll say set definition from tempo. Hit OK. All right, and now at this point, we don't. So we should have this. So we see that this is playing back. Now, what some people do is just kind of. Now, once we've done this, I could just say, okay, let's make it 144-ish. Now, depending, sometimes you may have sections where, like a drum fill could throw it off. So if you notice that it is, at that point, maybe, part of it, needed to do like an offbeat correction, you could just come over here and just say, okay, I want to do, instead of turning the tempo off, we could say, I want to do a new version, and we'll say, okay, my tempo here is going to be 144, so we have multiple track versions, and then if you need to just kind of speed up at different points in time, you could just say, okay, I want this to be so we'll just do a step, and I can say, okay, at this point we could just speed up that tempo and slow it down just for that particular area. So give that a shot. All right, so we see from Adaroff, it says, hi Greg, weird but necessary question. Is there a way to make the selected tracks on the left be highlighted way more, like in version 12? Most of the times I don't know if it is selected or not. All right, so let's say I come here. If we go to your preferences, and we can see that this is selected, but it could be subtle. So let's come here to preferences. Let's go to user interface to track and mix console settings, and you'll see selected track brightness. And I'll hit apply, and then we could just have that automatically. So as we come, we could make that track brighter like so. So again, preferences to user interface, track and mix console channel colors, and then you'll see selection brightness, adjust that. Okay, so we see from Justin says, hi, I've always tried to add sample piano track to live piano, but when playing does not match the original piano. Please help. So I'm not sure if you're trying to like take an audio recording of a piano and convert that into MIDI. So if when we do like the audio conversion to MIDI, it's only designed to work with monophonic sources like a bass, vocal, saxophone, and not chords. So let me know how you're trying to, so I mean, you could play along in MIDI to the sample piano part. So let's say if I have this, and I'm just a horrific piano player, so I'll apologize to all keyboard players in advance, but let's say I want to come here and we could say, let's think we could do like if you wanted to just come over here and say while we're playing. And then you could play along with it, but if it's a recording of a piano, it's not designed to convert like chords to MIDI to work with. So if you could specify that, Justin, it'd be great. All right, so you see Gareth just asked, will I have time to do some Christmas bass this weekend? So sure. And I have kind of a shorter week next week, but yeah, I should have some time. So please send over the track. I'd love to play bass on it for you, Gareth. All right, so we see Patrick Manuel A says today's live session was great. Glad it was helpful. Okay, so Paul Davis just saying he's back in the house to see what else he could learn today. All right, so we see Matt Lewis. Hi, Greg. Could you please explain how to make a seamless loop of a track so once the track has played once, it seamlessly loops back to the start and plays again, and how to record it, please? Okay, so let's say I want to make, I'll come into the sample editor here, and I want to do a loop. Okay, so I'm going to route this to a group track. Okay. And we'll make it a stereo group. And we'll just call this track. Okay, so I'm just going to find, we'll go into the sample editor. And I'll just take it out of Very Audio. So let's go to all right, so I'm going to, let's right click in here and we'll go to our settings. And I think there's something called independent track loop. Let's see. All right, so let's see if we activate this. All right, so let's say okay, so I think that we could right, so let me just activate my loop here. Okay, so let's say I have that as my loop. Okay, so let's say I've set my loop point, and okay, so I'm going to put this on independent track loop. Okay, and we see this in the sample editor right here. So again, I'm going to, and we see this is kind of smaller. Okay, so I'm just going to listen to this. Okay, so I'm going to take off the loop here, and this project will continue to kind of play. All right, so this is continuing to play. So what I'm going to do now is I've set the output of this track to a group. All right, so this is our track group here. And now what I want to do is to add an audio track, and we're going to set this to our group track. Okay, that is our input. So as I play now, so this, once we activate it to independent track loop, I'm going to keep this editor open, and as I play, I'm just going to record this audio track. So we'll say this is our loop. So I'm going to start from the beginning here. So now, even though that the track is continuing to play and add different instruments, this independent track loop is now functioning independently. The audio, instead of this track continuing to play, it's just this portion that's repeating over and over again. The audio out is going into this group. The group is now going directly into the input of this track that we're recording. So now we're just recording that perfect loop. So, and at that point, you know, while this song is continuing to play and add instruments, the piano, saxophone, this is just playing that loop that we had right there. So let me know if that's kind of what you want it to accomplish. So that's how you kind of make a seamless loop of a track and record it. All right, so we see from Justin about the MIDI piano, just a further clarification. It says, I do mixing for live recorded songs. At times I need to change the live played piano with the VST instrument. After converting to MIDI, when I hit play, nothing plays. Is the live piano. So yeah, again, like, you know, it's not going to work with chords or, so piano parts, you know, think of it, you could do it for monophonic sources like bass and other instruments. All right, I just had a big jump in my chat field. Okay. All right, so let me find my spot. Okay, just looking where I find my spot. Sorry about that. Okay, so I think I'm back where I was. All right, so Rob asks, hi from Tarpon Springs, so glad you can make it. Is there a behavior you can define for Alt, Control, Shift, and Tab so as to have many, as to how they may affect individual effect actions? Is there a general example as to how they are used? So they could be used differently for different tools. So let's say if I come here and split, if I have my split tool and I hold down my Alt key, that will split at even intervals. If I have a number of parts that I want it to join together, like multiple events, the alter option sometimes gives you kind of like extended powers. Like say from here with the glue tool, I can now glue those particular parts together to make them all one instead of gluing them individually. If we want to cut, so again, like let's say if I had a number of events here on my part and I want to mute different events, at this point, I think if we hold, I thought Alt, double click maybe, no, doesn't seem like that one. But, you could find a lot of how these, will work with different tools. The modifiers will have different functions for different tools. And if you wanted to find their reference or to change the modifiers for the different tools, if you go to preferences, you can see them listed here. And under editing to tool modifiers, so you can see that when you go to the draw tool, holding shift will do this. If, when you're in the glue tool, option will do this particular function there. So, it's not always the same concept. You'll notice kind of similar themes, but different tools may have different functions that are kind of inherent with the particular tools. So like if I'm in the range selection tool, I could select, just on particular tracks like that, like lassoing, or if we hold down Control Shift, that will be global for all tracks, including, tempo track. But check out those preferences, Rob, and I think that will help. And let me know if I misunderstood. All right, so we see Rick Show just has a great tip on the drum editor. And this is going back to Patrick's question about different rhythmic outputs. He said you could set the out note on to C1 for several lanes. Each lane have a different time division so that you could just put in different ones. It's a great tip. All right, wonderful to see David Reuter and Kristen Parisi from Big Tent in Nashville. Just wish me a happy Thanksgiving. I hope you guys are doing great. I miss seeing you guys in Nashville. I look forward to my next visit to Nashville to signing the board at Big Tent Productions, if I could be so honored. So you see Sean Taylor just says, thanks for coming back to me, Greg. You changed it in the correct preference screen. Could it be a bug? So I'll do some more investigation, but send me like an email reminder over the weekend. But I'll play around with it over the weekend. I'll make a note when I'm doing the index to see if I could figure that out. All right, so a question from Rick Show. How do you set up the chord pads with multiple patterns playing different instruments? Also, can you use MIDI tracks and route to just one instrument, thus play with different patterns? So what you can do, we can think of when we do the chord pad patterns, these will kind of be global, but these same patterns as we showed earlier, if we have just an instrument track, when we're here, so let's say we have an instrument track, but, these patterns, if we have these patterns in, these same patterns could be just dragged and dropped. If you wanted to have multiple patterns going on simultaneously, we could use just the Apache SX, and here you could drop MIDI patterns. When you go to the sequence, just drag and drop MIDI patterns right in. And that way different tracks could each have their own unique MIDI pattern, or they could have multiple MIDI patterns because you could have 4 different patterns going on simultaneously per instrument. All right. All right, so we see, hi Greg, I really want to use wireless headphones while on Nuendo, V-Moto Crossfade 3 Bluetooth. What are your thoughts or suggestions to this approach? I mean, generally, I would tend not to use wireless headphones. One, often Bluetooth headphones are going to be limited to only working at 44.1K sample rate. So if you're doing anything at 48K, 96K, 192, 384, if you're Nuendo, it's not going to pass that. There's also a significant amount of latency, like 43, 44 milliseconds of latency for headphones over Bluetooth, and that could be annoying. Some people are fine with it, and other people, it's like scratching nails on a chalkboard. And I think that if most people are sitting, I could see if you're walking around doing an activity that wireless headphones make sense. Like if you're playing in a band and you want to run around the stage, having a wireless system for your guitar or microphone or bass, could make sense, so you're not restricted to particular areas. So I think most of the time when people are working with Nuendo, you're sitting in front of a display screen and you're kind of fixed. So to me, I would tend to use wired headphones every day, and I do use wired headphones every day. I have really nice Sony headphones, the WX1004, that I love for travel and sitting on a plane. But even sitting on a plane watching a movie with those over Bluetooth, the latency bothers me. So I would, unless you need to be portable, just consider using wired, headphones. I think it just solves a lot of problems, and it just takes out a big variable, because obviously when you have all of your sound being converted to Bluetooth, it's not full resolution audio. And if you're using Nuendo, probably audio quality is a significant factor for your choice in your setup. So I wouldn't leave like kind of the most critical stage to a Bluetooth codec to get everything right. So I would, unless you really need to be portable, if you're going to be sitting in your studio with the display, a headphone wire is so inconsequential, because you probably don't have a wireless display. You probably don't have wireless connection from your audio interface to your, to the computer. So in a studio, there's wires, and, these wires have worked for decades. And I think it'll be best if you could do wired headphones. You could do Bluetooth, but, if you're doing tracking, then it's also could be problematic as well, because a lot of times your input would be Bluetooth as opposed to just the output. Just my thoughts. Maybe others could share their experience. All right, so we see from Uno Memento asks, I have a vocal track. Can I choose different separate areas from the track simultaneously with the range selection tool? So we can think of the range as selecting just a common range. But one of the things you can do, if you hit now in 13 with the range tool, if you hit Shift plus X and then switch to the selection tool, that event is selected. So let's see if I come here and split, and then, so I'll hit Shift X and then 1. So, so the range is going to be like a single range, but now you could split the particular, so once you have the range tool, and it's a new addition in 13, so I select with the range, split, and then 1. I switch to the selection tool, that event is selected. So you could change colors of the selected events if you wanted to, so that all your selected events, and you could kind of create a macro for that. So let's say if I wanted to make a macro to split the event and color it, let's just do this real quick. So we go to our key commands, and it's so much easier in version 12. So I want to do Shift X, and I may need to just, let's go to our project logical editor, and we'll go to setup, and I will say I'm going to take container type is event, and we'll make it property is selected. And what we want to do is to set color. We'll set it to a fixed value. So I want all my selections to be, let's say, green. Okay. So I'm going to save this as a preset. Okay, so now we'll go back to our macros so we can include that particular function. But let's come here, go to our key command. Okay, so we have new macro, so we'll go to select our key command here. So, and we'll just hit Shift X. All right, and we'll add that command. And let's say now I want to go to my object selection tool. Okay. All right, I guess I already did this, so let's come here. Make it red, add command. Okay, so now we're going to take this selection, and now if I do this and if I did it right, that event is automatically red. So if at this point I come and, this is great, I love about the macros now, we can just test it. So you want to take that selection, turn it red. So while it's not selecting multiple events, we could split and easily identify the particular events using a macro like this. So you can say, okay, these are the events I need to select. Let me get rid of them. Let me edit these. So just, so maybe an approach like that, uno momento, will work. All right, we see Jeff Sabelski is like number 93. Thank you for that. See, John Koskin just says about the Bluetooth headphones that, I think you'll notice a time delay of Bluetooth, but Greg knows all. So I'm still learning new stuff every day. All right, so we see Kerwin Young says, happy Friday, everyone. I was surprised to see Nuendo 13 released so soon. We got some great new goodies from Steinberg in November. So, yeah, we're trying to get all of the Black Friday funds early before everyone else. So, All right, so we have a question from Patrick Maynaville. Greg, do we have an option like I have an automation starting on -18? Now I raise the slider. If I leave the slider, it should return to -18 again. It should remain the same until I touch it again. Is it possible? So when we do this, realize that a lot of times, when we want to do this is, if we were to think of the paradigm of a hardware fader. And what we could do is, if we move the fader, it's going to remain in that position until, if there's no way for the fader to know what happened. So one of the tricks we could do is just come over here. So say, okay, we want my fader to be at -18, all right? And I'm just going to put an end point here. And, we could just set this. All right, so now when I come and we put it into touch mode, so let's grab the fader here. Okay, and we start to automate. All right, so just like what we would do, the fader is going to stay at that particular level because there's no value for it to return to. So we come, all right, I'll just move it a little closer here. All right, and it's going to jump. All right, so what we want to do is just to have Okay, so what we want to do, I'll just revert this real quick because I probably destroyed some automation stuff. Okay, so let me just open up the automation. Okay, so let's write automation. All right, so if I'm down here, so let's say we're writing. Okay, so let's say I'm here at this point, and now I want to do just a quick touch up. So I'll just come here. And then when we let go, it stays at that value because it doesn't know what value to return to. So if you want, what you do is just if you put like a value here at the end, and let's say I put it into touch mode, as soon as I release, it will jump right back because if there's no value, then the fader, just by its nature will stay at that same position. So I think what some people will do is if you open up the automation panel here, is we could choose to write to start and end. So let's say I just want to put an initial value in. And at that point, I think we will, at the end of the project, we'll have kind of our automation node. And then as we do a touch, but if there's no value for it to return to, I'll just put one here. So now, let's say before I did that automation. So if we know what the return point is, and I let go, it goes right back to where it was. But, another thing that people often miss is now you could just grab the range tool and just say, oh, I want that, up or down. And you could just set up multiple points just like that as well if you need to do quick automation bumps. But again, if we move the fader up and it doesn't know where to return, if there's no value after that to return, then it won't. But if there is a value, and if you're in touch mode, it will jump right back. All right, so we see Rick Show says, in the complete control software, I can load Retrolog just fine, but is there a way to load Cubase effects into complete control? So I don't have a complete controller. Retrolog can work as a standalone VST instrument, so I'm not sure what the capabilities are with the complete control. So they haven't sent one to me. So I can't really comment. I haven't worked with it or had any experience. But there are ways of utilizing the MIDI remote system that you could probably have it automatically work with particular plugins using Focus Quick Controls quite easily. Okay, so Pal Mal asks, can you run through the different time stretch algorithm options, pitch versus formant, etc.? Okay, so let's come over here, and when we go through our time stretching, so we'll select our event, and we'll just make sure I have my info line. Okay. Okay, so we'll have different algorithms here. So usually these are kind of more for legacy projects that may have used, I think like these are introduced in Cubase SX3. We don't want to necessarily get rid of those algorithms because people have depended on those. But probably the higher quality algorithms are the Elastique. We'll see kind of 3 different families. So we'll see efficient. These are more CPU efficient. We will see formant based. So often when we're working with formants, and this could be like often utilized with voices. Like if you have, I'll just show an example here real quick. So just so you could hear it, because once you hear it, it's like, oh, that's a formant. Okay, so I'm going to make a sampler track out of this. So what formants will I do is, let's say, so let's say if I was kind of doing pitch shift on this, or like some audio warp, and we put it into like our vocal. So if I played it like a much lower, so what we could do is you could adjust kind of the formants here. So the formants often, if you wanted a voice to sound like from younger to older or male to female, those would kind of have different resonant frequencies, and the formants would preserve that. So often with pitch information, we'd want to choose formant. So if I was doing like piano with like really dense chord voicings, I would probably choose formant for that. So if we played it, and then we have time. So we could think of, formant preservation, think about for more harmonically, like where the pitch of the notes are more critical. And then we have just our basic Elastique Pro. So most people use just kind of the basic rhythms. And again, these will be broken down into time and pitch. So think of this as like more percussive drums, maybe like a chunky rhythm guitar. If it's going to be pitch, voice, piano, acoustic guitar, organ, strings, that's a good algorithm. And tape, the tape algorithm will actually mimic kind of a very speed recording, like on an analog tape deck when you slow down the speed of the tape recording, and the old trick was, okay, I can't play this super fast, so I'm going to run the tape at half speed, record it, an octave lower, and then when I speed up the tape, it's like, wow, I sound like I can really play that part super fast, and the part would speed up. So the tape, so within these three, we can think of these as being kind of more formant based. And again, we could choose these. So time, rhythmic, pitch is going to be more for harmonically, guitar, piano, voice, and then tape is doing like very speed recording, and then so you could just kind of experiment. A lot of times people will leave it on just the default algorithm and say, oh, it sounds great. But if something, like let's say you do it on a default algorithm and you're like, the piano is a little weird on that, then try switching it to formant pitch, or try switching it to pitch. So different material can relate differently to the different algorithms as they're stretched in real time. All right, so we see just from Mini Matesbro says, thank you, Greg. I mentioned the GUI because it's kind of difficult to see the audio waveform on the grid properly. I edit more audio than MIDI. Thank you for your help. So, there are adjustments for that. So let's say I want to see, the audio on the grid. So one, if you wanted to increase the grid lines, but you could also there's a lot of preferences for how the audio is shown. So let's come over here to event display, and if you go to audio, we could say, okay, I want the waveform brightness. So we come here, we can say, okay, let's just grab that, and I could make that brighter. We could also just choose the waveform outline intensity. So if we say, okay, I want the waveform to be we could apply kind of different functionality to the waveform there. And I think also if we go to but there are, and you could have like background color modulation for kind of low level amplitude. So, you could play around with a lot of these different settings here as well, and then a lot of those will be very similar to 12. You can get the same results. All right, so we see supervision would be cool in the lower or right zone. So you could kind of place it there, and you could always move the whole window over and have supervision on the right-hand side. I know people to do that. All right, wonderful to see Michael Pierce on the live stream. He now has one working computer. That's great. It's glad to hear you're making progress. All right, so we see, hi Greg, is it possible to set the track color by the event? So if you, let's say if we want to colorize this, so I'm not sure if you want to set, so we can see there like the waveform changes, like how we have it dark there. Let me just go back to my preferences. Set these to default. So do you want this color to be applied to, but if one of the things you can do is, let's say if I change the color here, so we could have independent colors, but I'm not sure. So if you want like this event to be carried over to the track, so I'm not sure if it does it automatically, but if you select the track, we can just go to your color tools and set it just like that. And I think now if we come here, that we could, so they could be independent of each other, but you might have to manually set it from if you have the track color, or if you're starting with the event color. All right, Harry Olive asks, good day, Greg. Is it possible to set a shortcut in Cubase 13 Pro with a logical editor to color track based on the track name? Example, vocal gets green, bass purple. Yeah, you can do that. So let's say I have add audio track, and let's say, okay, I want to call it vocal. Okay, so how to do this is we go to our project logical editor. Let's go to setup, and we'll choose transform. And we'll say we want to take our container type, we'll set to track, and we'll say name, and we'll say contains VOC in case you type, And now we want to insert, and we'll say set to fixed color. We'll say set color to fixed color, and I want every vocal track to be kind of purple-ish. All right, so now any track that contains VOC in the name, color purplish, like that. So, or if you wanted to say exactly equals vocal, and you want to choose this color. So that way you could just simply name the track. So, I've kind of created different for different artists. Like I remember, like if you watch the Infected Mushroom video, like kick is always this color, kick is always this color, So you could just have a logical editor preset for, different naming to different colors, just using that. So let me know if that helps, Harry. See, Gareth just says, getting knowledge was totally different before YouTube. Yeah, definitely was. It was a lot harder. You had to be dedicated. All right, wonderful to see Tiago checking in from Brazil. We have Patrice Schneider just saying hello to everyone. Thanks for joining us. All right, so we have a question from Kevin Leicher, says, hi Greg, when mixing for Atmos 724 and binaural release, do you advise mixing binaural first, then tweaking for Atmos, or vice versa? I'm working on the best way to tackle large projects. So if I was approaching it, and how I see my friends are doing, tons of Atmos work, is they'll definitely work in like the full resolution speakers, like the 714, get that dialed in, and then test it binaurally, and then and it's testing it by they'll kind of do the critical work in the speakers and then test it in binaural, and they realize that 99.9% of the people that are going to be listening to the Atmos mix are probably listening to it binaurally. So, but I think most people start with the speakers, with the discrete speakers, and then we'll get that perfectly dialed in, then work on binaural, and then do the delivery. Maybe, I'm not sure, I haven't seen Michael Romanowski from Coast Mastering. I think that would probably be how he would do it, but if he's on, maybe he could comment. And he just got nominated for 4 Grammys for immersive stuff in Nuendo. So, all right, so we see K1 Classic says, I wish Steinberg comes out with another dedicated controller. Yeah, I'd like to have one too. So, and I could probably get one at a discount if Steinberg comes out with one. But we also wanted to make sure with the new MIDI remote that we could, kind of really, overall enhance the user experience for controllers, for, any controller, to get a lot of, configurability out of it without necessarily having to buy something proprietary. So you could take an existing controller that you have and do great things with it. All right, so Minnie asks, can we import Rex files into Cubase? So yeah, you could definitely, drag and drop them in and import them as, I think, just as standard audio files. When we go to import, we first company that supported Rex files way back when. So, but yeah, so definitely still do Rex files. All right, wonderful to see Gerald Ely from Martinez, California. Glad you can make it today. All right, we see. All right, so Gareth is just saying 101 likes, binary-tastic. All right, thank you so much, everyone. All right, see Gerald Ely just says track selection brightness. Cool, I need to do that. So it's a good feature. All right, so we see Michael Romanowski is on. Hey Greg, can I solo a reverb return, for example, without hearing the source? I'm not using the control room in Nuendo. So the only way to do it is using the control room. And I think that, Michael, you could probably use control room, but maybe just if you treated it very simply, you don't have to redo. I don't think you'd have to redo everything to utilize that. So, but the way to do that is through the control room, because it's kind of routed out through the listen bus. And I'll just show this for people that maybe aren't familiar with it. And congratulations on all your Grammy nominations, Michael. So let's say we listen to like this. So we have the reverb on. So now that it's going, we could go into our reverb. And when we solo the reverb, here it's going to solo the source tracks. But if we go to the listen mode for the reverb as we play,
I started losing sight my play.
And let me just go to my control room, and we could just come over here.
What dimension am I in?
All right, so I'll just, if I...
In the end, where is home?
So the only way that I know to do it is to utilize the control room, but you could probably just, set up a monitoring path through the control room that mimics your current outputs. I know maybe, and you could do it up for like an immersive setup. All right, so we see Jazz Dude says always convert Rex files into Spectrasonic Stylus RMX and then play those inside of Cubase. But you could also take Rex files into Groove Agent as well, just if people don't know that. All right, so just, yeah, looking forward, Gareth. I see comments about the bass part coming, so yeah, I'll have some time over the weekend, so, but looking forward to adding a bass line. All right, so we see Patrick just ask, hello, Greg, is it possible to give a key command to change the inspector quick control preset on a track? It'd be nice to move without the mouse from EQ band 1 preset to EQ band 3, etc. So, all right, let's come over here to the quick controls. All right. So I don't know of a way to switch from a key command. Let me just take a look. Yeah, so I'll pass it along, but I don't think that there's a way with a key command to do it. I think you still have to kind of go to the quick controls with the mouse, and I agree with you, that would be faster. Sorry about that. All right, you see John Koskian is just asking about Daryl, who used to be on the live streams, who had a city bus kind of ram into his house. And it seems like in Oakland. I think Sable might have been in touch with him. So maybe if Sable hears this, she could send our thoughts to Daryl. Hope he's doing well. He's a super nice gentleman. He's very enthusiastic. All right, so Patrice just says, I have a question. Many of my projects are 44.1, and today I played a project through Bluetooth Bose, and the sample rate was automatically set to 48K, which caused a higher pitch. How to fix? So generally, you're not, you have kind of fixed sample rates with Bluetooth headphones. So, that's kind of a nature of working with Bluetooth headphones. You're kind of stuck with one particular sample rate. So, maybe use a wired headphone. All right, sorry, my chat field just jumped. Let me see if I can find my spot. Okay, so I think I'm close. Yeah, and thanks, John Koskian, for mentioning Daryl, as I was just thinking of him last week. All right, so Charles Alexander Baudouin asks, Greg, is there a way to exclude tracks from being affected by the arranger track? Like, for example, arrange the instrumental tracks without affecting the vocal tracks, Cubase 12 Pro. So I think it's going to be the same because the arranger track is going to be global for the entire event. So let me just open up project with some arranger track data on it. I'll try one thing out of curiosity, but I don't think it'll work. right, so let's say we have our project here. So let's see if I drag my lead vocal into the upper zone. You know, and I think the problem with that is, you know, when we play back, let's say the arranger track here, so let's say we you know, if this is going in a different pattern than the rest of the project, that could be tricky. So, you know, you know, if you're not familiar with the arranger track, it's a great feature that a lot of people are kind of underutilizing, or you could take, like, you know, the intro, verse, chorus, and define these different areas and create kind of a non-linear arrangement. So instead of just this way we could have, instead of the arrangement playing straight from left to right, we could have it kind of work non-linearly, but for that to work, everything would need to be working non-linearly together. I mean, you could flatten it and then record a vocal, which would take it into a linear, but, you know, all of the tracks, all the tracks would be globally included with it. All right, so we see Patrice says, should I change the rate? And it's with the Bluetooth headphones. Should I change the rate on my sound card? And what will happen to older projects at 44.1? So, you know, if you're, you know, I wouldn't change the sample rate of my projects because of Bluetooth headphones. I would just get headphones that plugged into the audio interface so that you wouldn't have to do any sample rate conversion with that. All right. All right, we see an artist known as Love on from New York City. Thanks for joining us. All right, and he just says, Greg, I want to report that I had the easiest transition from Nuendo 12 to Nuendo 13. Max with Big Sur, thank you. Hit the like button, please, everyone. And Gareth says, whack a like. Okay. So Gareth just says, I hope everyone's as happy as Cubase 13 as he is. All right, so we have Bohan from Serbia. Great to see you on. Thanks for your videos. Love them. Can you please show a little bit about how to pitch bend for audio? Is there a simple way to just pencil out the pitch bending? I dug everywhere. So, you know, if we have an audio source, we'll show you there's probably two different approaches for it. Like if you want to just draw in pitch bend, let me just... I'll just do new project. I'll just import. All right. So if we do, let's say, just for kind of reference point, we'll take this as going to get our sonic bearing. All right, so if I wanted to take just kind of a section of my... So let's say I want to take just this particular area and do a pitch bend effect on it. If we go to audio to... we go to processes, and then we say pitch shift. And we could choose our number of semitones. So I just did 12. So I want to take that and do a pitch shift. So now we could so that's one way you can kind of do offline processing. And if you wanted to, just transpose, we could do it just kind of like that as well. Or if you wanted to, a lot of people with envelopes may like to kind of draw in different pitch bends. So if we wanted to do that on and then you could always undo that afterwards. One of the things that you could also, a different approach, is to just use the sampler track. So if I have my sampler track here, I could just drag the audio in. I'll mute this. Let's just draw in a note. So I'll create just an event. And we'll say our root note here is C3. So I'm going to put in a C3 note. All right, so now as we listen to this, we'll say, okay, let's... And now that it's on the sampler track, we go to our sampler control. And we could just activate pitch bend. Let's see if and now we could just within the sampler track itself. So right now we have pitch bend set to 2. Let's say I'll set it to 12. And then we could just come here to pitch bend. We could set our semitones here to an octave to match what the instrument is. And we'll just now raise this up and say I just want to draw in pitch bend. So if you wanted to just kind of, grab the line tool here and just say, okay, let's just. So a couple of different approaches if you wanted to kind of do MIDI style pitch bending and apply it to audio. Think of using the sampler track or just doing the offline process. Okay. See, are people just saying don't use Bluetooth headphones? Probably not worth it. All right, so we see DJR Beats says discounts on updates from Cubase 12 to 13. So, when you do the update, there are, it is discounted already. But I wouldn't anticipate having a sale anytime on updates. I think it would be kind of a slap in the face to a lot of users if we came out with a sale 2 weeks after Cubase was released. So I wouldn't anticipate an update sale for a little while. Just out of respect for customers. All right, so we see, suppose I have a drum pattern recording in a single track. Can you please show an easier way on how to replace the kick snare sound alone of the recorded in a track with another better sample? So there's probably a couple different approaches. So if there's one that's utilizing SpectraLayers Pro that's really interesting, so I'll show you that. Okay, so let's take just this drum loop here. Okay, so now when we go to SpectraLayers, we'll come over here to our extension. And then we could say, let's unmix drums. Okay, so, and here we could unmix like kick, snare, and cymbals. We'll hit OK. Okay, so now that we've done that, we could see our kick and snare. So I'm going to drag my kick out. And we'll put that into the correct time. Let's take our snare and we could drag that out. Sorry, just putting it in. All right. So we've isolated these, and what we can do now is just double click. So if we want to just listen to our drums. So if we want to just solo the kick, and listen to it with the snare. Now once these are isolated, what we could do, we'll bounce, come to my audio, we'll bounce selection. Here, I'll just all right, and now we can go to our hit points in the sample editor. So let's get to hit points, and now we can come over here. We'll take our hit points, we'll just adjust, say where our hit points are, and at this point we can create MIDI notes. So we'll say let's create MIDI notes of the kick and create MIDI notes of the snare. And we can put these on different pitches. And then you could have your kick and snare that you could send to any virtual instrument for replacement. So, but that will require SpectraLayers Pro, but it could be some great upcoming sales on it. Who knows? There's a big holiday next week in the US. So we have Dr. McFarland Studios ask, what is the biggest strength of Cubase? So what I've always found appealing about Cubase is it doesn't necessarily put me into a preconceived notion of working. I see people working other programs. I notice that a lot of their stuff sounds exactly the same as other people using the same program because there's kind of a predisposed workflow. And it's like, oh, everyone just does it the same exact way. But I think Cubase, people work their own way. That Cubase adapts to customers' individual workflows much better than other programs. So I think, it's probably the only tool that, someone like Zed, who's doing like, a lot of, EDM work and circuit, and Ian Kirkpatrick, and as well as Stevie Wonder and Paul McCartney and the guys in Genesis, and going into Hans Zimmer and, James Newton Howard, and all the big film composers, Ludwig Göransson, Harry Gregson Williams. Those people have really radical different workflows and different needs and requirements. Or someone who's, recording rock bands or recording country music. Really very different needs, but Cubase can accommodate all of their particular workflows very well and be creative and still kind of inspiring to use every time. So, and I think with Cubase 13, what they've done is, allow you to access more information in quicker ways. So, instead of opening up 16 different vocal processes for a particular plugin, you could just have the vocal chain, and that could do all 16 processes in one environment, so that you're not just scattered with different technologies. And I think that the included tools are the most thorough in the industry, so that you don't really rely, or there's no real need to have a lot of extensive third-party plugin support. So with Cubase, and I think, and probably one of the most important concepts is that Steinberg has the ideas first. And we develop kind of the feature sets, and we develop, the standard working flows, and the other companies just kind of, pick up on it later. But it's hard to have that initial idea. In 1996, when we said, hey, we're going to do this, do all the processing in the computer, a lot of people thought we were crazy and would go out of business. And the computers keep getting faster and faster and faster, and we could do more and more. So, what was just, a tremendous amount of outboard equipment and virtual instruments you could do on a laptop now. So, but Steinberg is the company that had that vision first to do that, to be, to be free from, proprietary, soon to be obsolete hardware. So Steinberg has good ideas. And we do these live streams all the time too, to help people use their Cubase better. All right. All right, so we see John Koskin just says, tell me how to start a GoFundMe for a trumpeter in a wheelchair, 2,500 miles from my home, whom I've never met. Let me know. So maybe we could talk about it on the next Zoom social meetup if it's for Daryl. I think it'd be, we can maybe all put our heads together to help Daryl out. So maybe Sable has some more information. I know she was in touch with him afterwards. All right, so we see from William Baker, hi all, question, I have a Motu Microlight and I have to remove/reinstall the drivers each time I launch Cubase 12, and when I go to close Cubase 12, it doesn't close. I have to shut down the Win 10 PC. Any ideas? So generally when it's not closing, it could be a plugin that's kind of hanging, that's saying, that's not releasing from memory. So 99% of the time, it's a plugin that's causing Cubase not to close. With your Motu Microlight, it says you have to reinstall the drivers. Check to see, if I assume it's a USB interface, make sure you're connected directly to the computer and not through a hub. Sometimes there's a lot of issues with USB power where, a lot of times computers will throttle, kind of hold back all of the power to be more green or eco-friendly, to use less energy. And one of the things that they do is they can turn off like all the power consumption of your device. Like on my personal studio PC, I have one controller, it just takes too much power. So like my whole Cubase will be lethargic if that's plugged in and doesn't have an external power supply. When it has that, it's fine. But, you know, be aware that, you know, on your PC that, you know, you may have to go and use the Steinberg power scheme for once. If you go to your studio setup and go to your audio system, you'll see use Steinberg power scheme, but go into your BIOS of your Windows machine and make sure that you have the full power on all of the USB ports as well. And, you know, make sure that your interface is turned on before you start Cubase. Sometimes people don't do that. They turn it on afterwards and then they have to define it. So give those suggestions a try, William. Okay, so you see from Bohan just says, do we ask questions here? Or, yeah, so in the chat field is where you could just ask questions. So. All right, so we see from Kevin Mehmed, great to see you on the live stream, Kevin. Hope you're doing well. It says, what new sampler come with new Cubase 13 Pro than in Cubase 12 Pro? So when working with the sampler track, one of the things that you could do now is there's a couple new things. One is the ability to, you know, there's new time stretching algorithms. So you have, this must be kind of old sampler track. But there are new, once we go into the audio warp, you could have spectral stretching algorithms, spectral HD and spectral vocal. When dealing with, let's say when we're working with just very simple stuff, like, you know, there's an entire new envelope section that's really handy. So let's say if we're here, I want to take just like a very simple sound and let's make it more interesting. We can come over here to our, so say I want this sound to fade in more, so I want less of an attack, I want to, and let's just, we have unlimited levels of undo within the sampler now as well. So we come here. But one of the cool things is when we want to make stuff a little more interesting is we could just kind of draw in different envelope nodes. So let's say I want this to be much louder here. But we could also, let's say, if we're going to kind of start fresh, we have these new envelope shapes. So I could just paint these in and we could paint this synchronized to the grid. So let's say from this point, I just want to so now at this point we could, you know, tend to do all sorts of great envelopes. We could select a range of the envelopes here. Say I want these, right click. Let's invert those levels. I want to take these levels here. Let's kind of like how we do controller editing. I want to scale. I want to compress or expand. I want to tilt. So all these things that we could do very easily with envelopes. So that's some of the new sampler functionality that was introduced in Cubase 13. All right, so Nasser asks, I want to know how cursor returned to start position, please. Yeah, this is one of the things that was moved from an obscure place in the preferences, and we moved it to the transport menu into a new function that's called the start mode. So we had the start mode. We could just click here and say return to start position on stop. So now when I hit play here, and we zoom out. When I stop, it goes right back to the position where we started playing. And there's a lot of other goodies there, but again, go to your transport, to start mode, to return to start position on stop. All right. All right, wonderful to see Pablo has made it with his coffee teas for me. So 22 minutes, I can have a coffee then. If I have a coffee before the live stream, I'd have to take a bathroom break in the middle of the live stream. But so wonderful to see you, Pablo. Glad you can make it. We have the whole hot mess contingent on. Everyone's happy to see Pablo. All right, so we see from Anders, says, hi, is there still time to ask a question? It's been a 3-hour stream, so not sure if it's too late. So we usually go for about 4 hours, but yeah, ask your question, and we'll try to get it in. We got some that were... All right, Zephaniah asks, is it possible to do multi-track automation at once using Artist 10 PC? So I think if we want to do this, if you have a control surface, you could definitely use that. But one of the things you could also do is if you link channels together. So I'll come over here. Let's just go to this project here. So let's say I want to link all my drums. Let's say I have their kind of proportional volume. If we select all of the drum tracks here, and then we could do Q-link, and then I'll just choose to edit or to write the automation. And now as I do this, I could just move all of my drums. I move one fader, they're all moved up and down, and we can keep it proportional or absolute value, and we can see that the automation is just being written in as we do that. So select all the tracks, again put the Q-link on, and we could write automation to multiple tracks just that way. If you have a control surface, you could use your control surface for it as well. So if I wanted to use my control surface, let's say I have my Korg Nano control here, we could say go to the mixer template, and now as I automate, I can grab the first 8 faders here, and we can see the automation just kind of being written in, my nonsensical mix here. So even just a very simple control surface, you could do multi-track automation. All right, so Anders' question is, hi Greg, what's the best way to sync up a vocal stem? If the tempo is different, I use the sizing applies time stretch tool most times, but sometimes it's not obvious how much is needed. So, one of the things that could be, if you know that the vocal is recorded at 80 beats a minute and the new project is at 100 beats a minute, you're able to, go select the event, go into like your pool window, and so let's go to your pool window here, and you could say, okay, it's 80 beats a minute. You could check the tempo and place it into musical mode. So you could take the track here, select it, put it into musical mode, change the tempo, and then it will speed up if it was needed to, if it was just speeding up and slowing down kind of all together. Now, a lot of times if you're doing something like that, also you may, if it's like a little bit off, this is when we could utilize something like audio warp. So if we go to the sample editor here, double click, we'll just say, okay, I want to go to my threshold here, and we'll look at the sample. So say I wanted to look at this part, we'll imagine it's a vocal, but we can find kind of the rhythmically significant parts, and then we could create warp markers. We'll see this little create tab. We could create warp markers, and as we switch to our warp tool and we go to free warp, at this point we can say, oh, this was a little early, this was a little late. We could add new warp markers, and we could just if it's like subtle changes, this is where this could come in. If you know the whole project was 80 and then sped up to 100, then make sure you have the tempo assigned to the file, and you could just kind of come over here and see the particular tempo and put it into musical mode. And then once it's in musical mode, it will snap to the current project window, but it needs the origin time first. If you need to make small adjustments, think of doing the audio warp mode. All right, let me jump to, I know we had some questions that were sent in advance. Let me get to some of those. I think we got some of them answered already. All right, so we had this question, how to enable or disable mixer parameter control from the mouse scroll wheel. All right, so one of the new things that's popped up is, let's say if we have like a send, we just add like an effects channel send to this. All right, so we're going to add couple of sends. We go to our send value, we will see our sends here. So now one of the things that people have noticed was different was they would often come here to adjust using their mouse scroll wheel, and as they work with it, they realize that the scroll wheel is only going up or down, and a lot of people complain because of the other way. So if we go to our preferences and we go to editing to project and mix console, we can now, there's a preference that's on by default called vertical scrolling disables mouse wheel for parameter change. And this is often so that you can just use the scroll wheel to navigate up and down. But now if we want to adjust the parameters, we come over and just now we could use the scroll wheel here to increment. And as we go to the side, we can navigate up and down, but just so that, especially in a large mix console, people would scroll down and then adjust and change parameters by accident, and now we could fix that with that particular preference. So again, come over here to preferences, to editing to project and mix console, and you'll see vertical scrolling disables mouse wheel for parameters. So you could check or uncheck that. All right, so we had a question on how to do note expression editing from MIDI recorded from a Rolly controller. Okay, so we will just open up a particular file here for this. Okay. All right, let me just open up a different one. Okay, so when we have like a particular event that was recorded, let's say, all right. Okay, so let's say we have an event that was recorded, to get like a Rolly controller to work, we would need to go to your studio setup, click on the plus sign, add a note expression device, and then we could connect the Rolly device and map the different functions here. But you may record like, moving horizontally or vertically or applying pressure on different notes individually. And to see that, what you need to do in the MIDI editor in Cubase is activate this little icon here. So when we double click, we could go into the note expression editor. By default, I believe it's set to double click erases a note. So when this option is active, when we double click, we can now see the note expression editor. So when we go to our note expression data, let's say, okay, I wanted volume control. So we could have different volume control for different notes and different pitch bend for different notes. So at this point, let's say I have volume, and now I wanted to do tuning just for that one particular note. So now when I double click on the note, we could see these different parameters that are going to be note based. So as we listen to this, we could just hear our different. So as you kind of work with that, so make sure that this is turned on and then double click on the notes. And then when you go to the note expression, here's where you can see all the different parameters that you can edit on the individual note basis. All right. Okay, so we see a question. Hello, thanks for the great tutorials, Greg, and searchable databases. How to play some content from Media Bay on or channel presets that contain Prologue synth in Cubase 12/13 world. All right, so the Prologue synth was discontinued because the people that were developing it weren't able to or chose not to continue to develop it for being native for Apple Silicon and later operating systems. So it's not working in Cubase 12 or 13. If you Google, you may be able to copy a file over from one location in Cubase 12 to another in Cubase 13 to have it show up, and then it will be active. You may lose some of the presets, but if the instrument isn't working in Cubase 12 or 13, then the presets, to load up the parameters of that instrument aren't going to load. So by default, it's not going to work in Cubase 12 or 13, but you could try Googling some solutions that aren't officially supported that may get you there. And then once you have the instrument working in Cubase 12 or 13, then you could get it working. All right, next question. Hi, Greg. Could you please show how to get a count in for playback only on Cubase Pro? Sometimes I just want to play my guitar over a backing track, but by the time I've pressed play, got back to the guitar, the music is already underway. How can I get the count in when there is no recording going on, just playback? Many thanks, Michael. Okay, so let's say we want to start playback here. So when we do, there is a count in, and the count in is for recording. So we could come over here, and as we hit record on a particular track, we'll get a count in of like 1 or 2 bars. And so that works on recording, but if we're not recording, we don't get that pre-count. So what we could do is, instead of activating pre-count, we could activate something called pre-roll. And you might have to right-click here, and we could see pre-roll come right here. All right, so once we see pre-roll, at this point, we could activate the pre-roll, and we may just kind of slide this over, and we could say, I want 2 bars of pre-roll. So what this is going to do is it's going to kind of take the beginning of the project here, and when I hit play, not record, but when I hit play, it's going to roll back, let's say 2 bars. So that will just automatically, from this particular position, roll back 2 bars and start playing from there. Now, if you're starting at measure 1, let's say, and you're like, oh, I can't roll back 2 bars, what you can do is hit Shift S, and then you'll see display bar offset will set 2 bars. You'll ask if you want to, you've modified the offset. Do you want to keep the project content at its bar positions? We'll say yes. So now, even though we're starting at bar 1, we could have 2 bars of nothing. So when I hit play, with the pre-roll active, I could now just come here and have 2 bars. You could run to your guitar and then play just like that. So again, right click, make sure you have pre-roll turned on. It's probably disabled by default. And then you may have to take like the 3 little dots here and expand to set the pre-roll amount in measures, bars, beats, 16th note divisions, etc. Okay, and so we had a question. Hello, Greg. I hope all is well with you. I'm getting a MacBook Pro for production. How much RAM should be enough for me to do my work? And which CPU should I get? M3 Pro, M3 Max? You know, I think if you're investing in a new laptop, I tend to invest more on the concept of longevity. So I think, you know, the faster processor, as much RAM as you can get. You know, sometimes people, you know, there's kind of initially when the M1 is out, it's like, oh, you only need half the RAM of what you would need. And I don't think that's the case if you're doing a lot of virtual instruments. If you're doing a lot of orchestral work, then, you know, 64 gigs of RAM is what I use on the machine that we're watching. And I think it has, you know, like really good performance. So I would, you know, I think if you got like the fastest processor and as much RAM, that could give you another year or 2 out of the system. It may seem more, but, you know, initially, but I think that computer can last you another 1.5 years, 2 years, then kind of maybe going less. So get as much RAM, get as much processor as you can, make that investment. I think it's a good investment because you get that power for the whole time that you're using the computer, and you could use that computer longer without having to replace it sooner in the future. All right, now we also had a question from last live stream, and it was about legato notes, and we actually, it was from Charles, I believe. So when we look at this particular note, we can see, and he was kind enough to send the passage, and I guess it wasn't, and the notes are kind of right on top of each other, like down to, and he said it was only playing back if he shortened the notes on external MIDI device. So realize that sometimes when you're doing something this precise, that the external MIDI is often not a really fast protocol. So just as a test, and Charles was happy enough to send his particular project, I just put it on, took the same MIDI information, and instead of running it on an external device. And one of the advantages of, you know, a MIDI in a virtual instrument is that you have sample accurate timing. So the timing is much, much tighter. For those of us who've been doing MIDI a long time, realize that the timing could be really inconsistent. So the same MIDI interface going to 2 different devices could be different if you recorded the audio and compared it. And it was very different and inconsistent. So when I play this particular passage back, and let's say we'll just listen to it, and I've just put this with Retrolog. And I'll take off the click track here and my pre-roll. So let's say we'll just listen to this now. So we could hear those little, and that's every new MIDI note that's coming. So let's say if I select every other note here, just so we could visualize it, and you'll hear kind of the click. And you'll notice that the click will come at every time one of those notes comes. So as we listen to it. So if that's not being translated the same way to your external MIDI device, it could be your MIDI interface isn't responding fast enough, or the instrument, or your MIDI interface isn't sending it fast enough to the instrument, and the instrument may not be capable of re-triggering those notes. But when doing it with a virtual instrument, with again the sample accurate precision, you could hear every note distinctly. So see if your end, if you just played it through, and I just opened up a retro log and just left it on the oscillator so we could hear it clearly without any envelopes on the attack. But it's playing back fine on a virtual instrument, but and it could be if you have like a string patch, you may not hear that as much. You may need to have the attack of the instrument really dialed in. All right, so that's it for questions. Let's see if we get one more question real quick. See how we're doing on time. Maybe we get one more question in. If I could navigate back. All right. All right, so we just see, is it possible to open the chord pads in a separate window? So I think it was always designed to be in the lower zone. So sometimes some of the windows were, like the MIDI editors were separate windows that were then kind of reduced to work in a smaller zone, but this was always designed to work in the lower zone, so you can't necessarily open it up to a different window. All right, so I think we're just about out of time. So we've gone 4 hours. I want to wish everyone a wonderful weekend. Thanks for spending your time this morning, evening, afternoon, learning more about Cubase products. And we will be doing this again on Tuesday, starting at 1 p.m. U.S. Eastern Time, same time. Again, next Friday is a holiday in the United States. We won't be doing a live stream then, but we will be following on the following Tuesday, and I think we'll go through like December 21st and maybe take a little break for the holidays. But with that, I want to wish everyone a wonderful weekend. I'm really grateful for all the great questions and hope that everyone has learned a new tip or trick using their Steinberg software, and we'll see you back on Tuesday. Thank you so much, and goodbye.